Wow. Okay. They can't hear. Is Matt in the closet?
Mayor, we can hear you now.
Oh, great. Okay.
Did the meeting start?
Well, we just did the Pledge of Allegiance. That's it.
Okay.
We had a pause here before calling the roll. Clerk, will
We
you go
never,
ahead?
none of us heard that, just so FYI.
Is there a lag?
The pledge.
We are going to call the roll now. Can you call the roll? And let's see.
Bajent.
Here.
Oh, yeah, it works.
Clegg.
Here.
Oh, okay.
Halliburton.
Here,
Sanchez.
Here.
Thompson.
here.
Woodings.
Here,
All present.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
a point of personal privilege. I'd like to note that none of our council members joining online were able to stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance with us because they could not hear.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize that. I guess it's because I was looking at the flags. But
We will just, at some point in the meeting, each of us will individually break into the Pledge of Allegiance to show our patriotism.
I'll try to out-patriot the other person. Okay. Next up, we have request for approval, the minutes of the work session and evening meeting of November 10th.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of the City Council work session and the City Council regular evening meeting of November 10th, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thompson.
Yes,
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
yes,
Sanchez.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And next up, under special business, we have the reappointment of Cindy Montoto to the Historic Preservation Commission for a 3-year term ending October 2023. And I'll just thank Cindy for the service she's given us already and her willingness to keep at it. She's a great addition or a great contributor to the commission and has done quite a bit for the community.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we reappoint Cindy Montoto to the Historic Preservation Commission for a 3-year term ending October 2023.
Without objection? All right, is Cindy, are you on the Zoom? If you are, I want to make sure we give you a chance to say hi.
Madam Mayor, I don't see her
Okay.
online.
Great. And then, well, thank you once again, Cindy, just for the record to reflect, we really appreciate your service. And next up, the ratification of the appointment of Tiffany McKee to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we ratify the appointment of Tiffany McKee to the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority Board.
Without objection? Wonderful. Thank you, Tiffany, for your service. Do you happen to be on the Zoom?
Madam Mayor, she is not on.
Okay.
So
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. Well, I have no objection to this. In fact, I fully support it. I just wanted to thank Tiffany and thank the county for filling this board seat. This is an important board, and I know that she'll do good work there.
Thank you very much. I agree. And thank you for the work that you do with that board as well. It's really important. All right, next up, we have the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thompson.
yes,
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
yes,
Sanchez.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And now, under ordinances for first reading. there's
Madam
quite a
Mayor,
few.
there are quite a few. Shar has her work cut out for her. I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the first reading calendar be read by title and number only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 47-20, an ordinance amending the Boise Development Code, Boise City Code, Title 11, Chapter 3, Section 4, to require design review prior to demolition of structures within existing design review districts, approving a summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 48-20, an ordinance repealing the Boise City Fire Prevention Code, Boise City Code, Title 5, Chapter 12, and enacting a new Boise City Fire Code, Title 5, Chapter 12, including adoption of the 2018 International Fire Code and associated amendments required by the state of Idaho. Also including the adoption of an updated wildland urban interface map and associated wildland urban interface standards, use and restrictions of foam water fire suppression systems, provisions related to the control valve and FACP locations, new requirements for spec warehouses, tenant space identification for multi-tenant occupancies and multifamily housing, updating duties and procedures for the Fire Board of Appeals, providing associated penalties, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date. ORD 49-20, an ordinance repealing Boise City Code Title I, Chapter 6, Section 3A4, Mayor and City Council salaries, and eliminating the regularly scheduled increase in the mayor's annual salary and providing an effective date. ORD 50-20, an ordinance repealing Boise City Code Title I, Chapter 6, Section 3B4, Mayor and City Council salaries, and eliminating the regularly scheduled increase to the City Council member's annual salary and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Thank you, Clerk. Yes.
I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 39-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 1, Boise City Building Code to adopt the 2018 International Building Code, including Appendix H, signs, Appendix J, grading, and certain amendments to Appendix J, grading, standardizing and correcting terminology, numbering and code references, updating fee schedule references, flood hazard maps, and flood hazard regulations, and separating the Boise City Building Code into commercial and residential subsections, approving a summary of the ordinance, providing an effective date. ORD 40-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 1, Boise City Building Code to adopt the 2018 International Residential Code, including Manual J design criteria, standardizing and correcting terminology, numbering and code references, updating fee schedule references, flood hazard maps, and flood hazard regulations, including Appendix Q, tiny houses, and Appendix S, straw bales construction, and separating the Boise City Building Code into commercial and residential subsections, and approving of summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 41-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 10, Boise City Building Code to adopt the 2018 International Existing Building Code, which establishes alternative methods and minimum requirements for work associated with existing structures, approving the summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 42-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 9, Boise City Energy Conservation Code to adopt the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code, associated required state amendments, approving the summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date. ORD 43-20, an ordinance repealing and replacing the Boise City Electrical Code, Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 5, adopting updated administrative provisions, designating the code official, updating Electrical Board of Appeals duties and procedures, establishing criteria for modifications, alternative materials and designs, defining work exempt for permits requiring dedicated branch circuit that may be used for electric vehicle charging in residential garage built in conjunction with new construction, approving a summary of the ordinance, providing an effective date. ORD 44-20, an ordinance CAR 20-00010 for property located at 1976 South Century Way, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in Section 1 of this ordinance from limited office with design review L-OD to light industrial with design review M-1D, setting forth a reason statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date. ORD 45-20, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Boise City, Idaho, approving the First Amendment to the Urban Renewal Plan West Side Downtown Urban Renewal Project, which First Amendment seeks to annex certain parcels to the existing West Side project area, which First Amendment includes revenue allocation financing provisions, authorizing the city clerk to transmit a copy of this ordinance and other required information to county and state officials and other taxing entities, providing severability, approving the summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date. ORD 46-20. An ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 1, Chapter 16 to allow for the inclusion of temporary expansions of alcohol license premises to be included on license renewal applications as directed by ABC. To clarify, the city's authorization to temporarily expand alcohol license premises shall end at the sunset date or upon notification from ABC, whichever comes first. To extend the automatic sunset provision to April 30th, 2022, and provide an effective date.
Thank you, clerk. And next up, third reading. I think your mic might not be on.
I turned it off when I sneezed. Madam Mayor, I move that further reading of ORD 35-20 be dispensed with and the record reflect that it has been read a third time in full.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez.
yes,
ORD 35-20, an ordinance amending the solid waste franchise agreement by and between the city of Boise, by and through its Public Works Department, the city, and Allied Waste Services of North America LLC, doing business as Republic Services of Boise, Republic Services. Adopting an updated reimbursement rate schedule to increase reimbursement rates paid to Republic Services for solid waste collection and disposal services, providing an effective date and approving a summary of the ordinance.
Madam Mayor, I move that ORD 35-20 be approved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez.
yes,
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, you can read the next two.
Okay. ORD 37-20, an ordinance CAR 19-00021 for property located at 1101 South Denver Avenue, 1108 South Grant Avenue, 1116 West Beacon Street, and 1105 South Manitou Avenue. Amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance from medium-density residential R-2 to University District U, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date. ORD 38-20, an ordinance CAR 20-0009 for property located at 1709 and 1711 South Federal Way, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance from medium-density residential R-2 to multifamily residential with design review R-3D, setting forth a recent statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor, I move that ORD 37-20 and ORD 38-20 be approved.
Second.
We have a
Madam
motion-
Mayor,
Yes.
if I could, I think because 37 and 38 were not included in the original motion, we need a motion that they've been read for the third time in full, just so we don't have any procedural issues on these.
Thanks. I didn't realize that. Yep. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can just make that motion now.
Madam Mayor, I move that further reading of ORD 37-20 and ORD 38-20 be dispensed with and the record reflect that they have been read the third time in full.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez.
yes,
All in favor, motion carries.
Yeah, and the record will reflect that we did both motions just in an unusual order. Okay. Next up, new business. Under subdivisions, we have Forester subdivision SUB 19-64. Carla, you just popped up in front. Welcome.
Madam Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Carla Nelson. I'm an associate planner with the Planning and Development Services. Just give me a moment to share my screen.
Sure, and while Carla's doing that, I'll just say that so we have Carla from the city of Boise who's presenting, and then the applicant is Greg Flint. You could let us know Greg, if you agree with the staff report or if you want to say more when we get to you. And then we have a neighborhood of record as West Valley. And again, not sure if you'll be speaking or will need to speak, but right now we have nobody from the public signed up in advance. But if you were on Zoom planning on speaking on this, just raise your hand and we'll be sure to call you. All right, thanks, Carla.
Before you this evening is a preliminary plat for a mixed-use subdivision comprised of 1 common and 41 buildable lots. The site is located on Fairview Avenue between Shamrock and Steelwood Avenue in a C2D General Commercial Zoning District. The preliminary plat has undergone a minor modification since the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. It now includes 2 commercial lots along the Fairview Avenue frontage. A financial institution with a drive-up window has been proposed for the southeast portion of the site and is currently being reviewed for conditional use permit approval. Another commercial use will occupy the southwest corner of the site. Other uses within the mixed-use subdivision will include 38 townhomes and an existing overflow parking lot for the adjacent car dealership. Several conditions were approved with the associated plan unit development. These conditions will buffer the townhomes from the surrounding automobile-oriented uses and will improve pedestrian connectivity through the site. The PUD conditions were not appealed and revised plans now show these improvements. However, with the inclusion of 2 commercial lots along Fairview Avenue, a few additional site-related conditions of approval are recommended. These will ensure sidewalk is placed along both sides of the shared service drive, and that cross access is provided between lots 3 and 2. Also, Fairview Avenue is planned to be widened to 7 lanes in the future, and an added condition will ensure that the sidewalk along Fairview be placed to allow for an 8-foot wide planter strip separation along this busy arterial roadway. The applicant has agreed to these conditions. In conclusion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval of the preliminary plat with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. All right.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. If I could, I have just a quick question of Carla. Given that the overflow parking lot is included in this application, if in the future there was an opportunity to reuse that overflow parking lot for more housing, my understanding is that the zoning would allow at least as much housing, at least the density of housing as on the rest of the lot, if not a little bit more. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Clegg, that is correct. There is, however, an 80-foot wide irrigation easement that covers a portion of that parking lot, which they would have to get some approvals through the irrigation company. But the density would allow it.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions for staff? All right. Mr. Flint, are you with us?
Good evening.
Hi there. Is there anything you'd like to add to the presentation, or are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report?
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. We are in agreement with the staff report and can meet those conditions as they've been outlined and as Carla has presented to everyone.
Great, very good to hear. Thank you. I
Thank
just
you.
want to double check before we move on. Is anybody else here to testify on this item? All right, are there further questions for staff or the applicant? We'll go ahead and close this hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I do have someone online that just raised their hand.
Oh,
for this
alrighty.
item. And that is Eric Malmberg.
Hi, Eric. If you'd let us know your name and address for the record.
I'm just attending on behalf of the client, Greg Flint, as well. I just wanted to make my presence known.
Oh, thank you very much. All right, well, with that, we'll close the hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve SUB 19-64 Forester Subdivision, Boise City preliminary plat with the recommended conditions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes, sorry.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez.
yes,
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we'll move into the public hearing portion of the evening. So with these, it's similar to the hearing that we just went through with subdivisions, but there are more people to speak on the different items. We will, with each of these, when we start it, we'll start with staff, then the applicant, then a neighborhood association. And at the beginning of each one, I will just make sure also, first I'll call on anybody that is in the council chambers so they can leave if they wish. And then we'll see who's joined us online and give you an opportunity to speak. I have one item, the last item where there are names signed up. So even if you haven't signed up, if you're on Zoom, we'll give you an opportunity to raise your little Zoom hand and be able to hear from you. And with that, Carla, go great. Carla, you're still with us. We'll move into the first item, CR 20-13.
Madam Mayor, council members, just give me a moment to share my screen. The next item before you tonight is a request to remove the existing development agreement on the property located at 5801 West Castle Drive. The DA was placed on the subject property in 2008 with the intent of expanding the residential care facility located directly to the west. The subject property retained its R1C zoning designation, but the DA utilized a general exception to apply the standards of the R2D DA zone to this property and limited the allowable use to a 25-bed residential care facility. The property is now owned by a separate entity who wishes to develop the property within the standard allowances of the R1C zone. The planning team recommends approval of the DA modification as the request will allow the property to develop in a manner consistent with the adjacent R1C zone properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Carla? All right, we have Matt Brookshire as the applicant. Matt, are you with us?
I am.
Hi there.
Hello, Mayor, Council, I agree with the staff and have nothing to add.
Well, thank you for your brevity. All right, we do have a neighborhood of record, association of record. It's Collister and either Suzanne Stone or Esther Seha.
Madam Mayor, I do not see them on the Zoom.
Okay, we thought it was unlikely they'd join us, but I just wanted to make sure. Any questions for staff or the applicant before I open it up to the public?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just a real quick question. It is noted in the staff report that given the fact that this is a collector, it's likely there will be only one driveway allowed.
Council
I
President?
just wanted to ask the applicant if they were aware of that. Yes,
Your internet is creating
Did you-
somewhat of a lag. There's been a voice lag the evening, but it just got a little worse. I'm going to suggest you turn off your camera and ask your question again because we weren't able to hear it.
thank you. Yeah, sometimes it does that. Anyway, I'll try to be brief. I just wanted to make sure that the applicant understood that if this modification is removed, that it's likely there will only be one driveway allowed to serve what will likely be two lots here.
Yes,
Matt, are you great?
yes, I'm still here. Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, we have not gotten into the design phase yet on this. It is our understanding that that's one of the criteria, and we plan to look into all all options working with council, with staff at that time.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there, I'm going to now open it up to the public. Is there anybody in the room that wanted to testify on this? Nope. All right. Is there anyone online that is here to testify on this item? If so, will you raise your Zoom hand?
Madam Mayor, there's no one online.
All right. There's nobody online either, if the record would reflect that. If there are no further questions for staff, I will go ahead and close the hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve CAR 20-13-5801 West Castle Drive, a development agreement modification to remove the existing modified development agreement on 0.29 acre subject property in an R1C DA zone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right. we'll
Madam
head on
Mayor,
to-
I'm going to try to reboot my computer. It's getting really squirrely, so I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, while the council president's doing that, we can go ahead and start this. This is an appeal. So, James, after the city goes, is it the appellant and then the applicant? Okay. Great. So with this one, we've got, I see Ted is here to present for the city. The appellant will go first. I'm not sure. There's two names, applicant and appellant. We've got Bob Stephanakis and Josh Leonard. Just want to make sure that you're here and ready. And then the neighborhood association is Nina. And I'm not sure if Nina plans to testify, but also just let us know if you're here. And then we have nobody that signed up in advance. So will you, if you are on the Zoom to testify on this item, again, just please raise your hand. And we will be sure to call on you during the public hearing part of this. All right, so first off, why don't we start with Ted?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to confirm that my screen is shared with the presentation.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. The application is an appeal of the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of an application to change the classification of a contributing house to non-contributing. The property is located at 1316 6th Street in the North End Historic District. This is a street view of the house as generally as it exists today. All properties in the historic districts are surveyed by an architectural historian. One of the key aspects of those surveys is to determine whether a property is contributing or non-contributing. As you can see from this slide, contributing means the structure holds historic integrity, and the goal is to keep that historic integrity in place by limiting impacts to the facade and obviously demolition. Whereas non-contributing structures have either lost their historic integrity or were constructed outside the period of significance for the historic district. These structures can be altered more significantly or even demolished. This slide lists the applicant's case for reclassification. The most important of these are the first two, as they are or were a part of the structure's facade design and readily visible from the public right-of-way. Other alterations less visible would not necessarily be seen as a detriment to the historic character of the structure. Additionally, maintenance or other issues with condition would not necessarily impact a structure's contributing classification. As you can see from these Sanborn maps, the original structure up to 1949 had a front porch on the north side and an entrance in the general same location. So here's the Sanborn map where my cursor is, and you'll see the porch. This designates a porch was located here on the front of the house in that location, and the entry on that location as well. Sometime after 1949, the porch was removed and the entrance moved to the south side of the structure. Later, a new porch was constructed, as you saw on that facade, on the south side of the house, which still exists today. Other alterations had occurred as well, but these were the more significant and visible changes. City code states that when a house is requested for reclassification, that the following be considered. First, was there an error in the determination, or did the consultant make a mistake when classifying the house as contributing? Second, were there inappropriate alterations that occurred after the survey was completed that might change the classification? The commission determined that there was not a mistake when the survey was completed. Because the Sanborn maps were included with the survey document, it was assumed the consultant knew about the alterations to the porch and entry and still determined the house to be contributing. Additionally, there were no significant alterations after the survey was completed. Also, the commission determined the vernacular style of the house had still retained its historic character even with those alterations, and that it still contributes to the district. The appellant's grounds for appeal center on the commission's apparent dismissal of what they consider significant alterations to the historic structure after the period of significance. Additionally, the appellants argue that the commission ignored key factors that are typically used to determine contributing or non-contributing status in the historic districts. Those factors, addressed in more detail in the report, allude to criteria established by the Secretary of Interior for identifying and establishing historic integrity. In short, staff believes the commission understood and addressed these criteria in their decision. Specifically, they indicated, though the house had undergone some change to the facade, it still maintained its historic integrity and character of a vernacular structure in the historic district. Staff did receive, we actually received 4 emails originally from neighbors in the area supporting the change of status to non-contributing based on the information provided in the application packet. Due to no errors being identified in the Historic Preservation Commission decision, staff does recommend denial of the appeal. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just have some questions, I guess, for some clarification I need since I haven't sat in on a ton of these. So if it is listed as contributing, that would eliminate the possibility for it to be demolished, but not necessarily the possibility for it to be added onto. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Halliburton, that is correct.
All right, that's all the clarification I needed. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Yeah,
TJ, I have one question.
great.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Ted, as I understand, you know, the Historic Preservation Commission relied on the original preservation documenting, and then I noted that we didn't get a separate one. Is that common to rely on the original one rather than getting a separate one during this process? Just checking. Sorry for my lack of terminology.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Thompson, just to clarify, I think you were breaking up, at least on my end. Are you asking why another survey maybe wasn't completed? And that
Yes, thank you.
Right. So that Madam Mayor, Council Member Thompson, that the original survey is really all we have right now to go off of. So a second survey, another survey wasn't completed. That certainly could have been something pursued by the applicant or the appellant in this case. They could have pursued another survey be completed for the property, and maybe another determination could have been made.
Okay, that helps. Thanks, Ted.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Ted, I think that answers my question, but I just want to clarify. If we were to do the appeal tonight and uphold the decision of the Historic Preservation Commission, is there any time limitation on the applicant pursuing their own survey and coming back with new information if it shows that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, no, that can certainly be done. Typically, when these surveys are completed, the State Historic Preservation Office needs to then verify those surveys and certify those surveys. So there would be some time to actually create the survey document, establish new criteria potentially for this property, and then have that certified by the State Historic Preservation Office. But there's no timeline on that. That is certainly something that could be done in this case, and then down the road we could readdress the classification.
So thank you. Just to follow up then, so unlike sometimes if we are turned down a particular kind of application, the applicant cannot reapply immediately for the same thing. This is a different, I just wanted to establish the different kind of process, and there wouldn't be that limitation. I don't believe there is, but I wanted to ask that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, as far as I know, I think if this was pursued again in the future with new information and a new survey document presented, then that could certainly, I believe that could certainly be accomplished in the future.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions before we head on to the appellant? All right. Josh, are you representing the appellant, or is it Bob Stephanakis speaking for himself?
Madam Mayor, can you hear me and see me?
Yep, we can.
Fantastic. I'm here. I represent Bob and Jen Stephanakos. I'm going to mess that name up all night, and I apologize to my client who's sitting here. He's tried to correct me several times. He's here too. He's here on this same Zoom session though, and he'll want to speak as well.
Great. Well, go ahead and you can get started.
Great. Can I share my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Just to confirm that you can see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Some of the key points I want to hit during this, you heard from staff what the legal standards are for considering this appeal. I want to point out those in this timeline that are highlighted in green, that the North End Historic District period of significance ended in 1949. There were minor changes to the home before that significant changes occurred after that. And then a reconnaissance survey, which is the type of survey that was performed, was conducted in February of 1999. Bob Stephanakos bought the home a couple of years later. And then you can see he was married. His son Theo was born in 2009. Daphne was born in 2012. And a couple of years ago, almost a couple of years ago, in May of 2019, an application was submitted for a certificate of appropriateness. And Councilmember Halliburton, to your question, although it becomes easier to demolish the home if this application is granted, the application in May of 2019 that was granted allows the applicant to take the house down to the studs and lift it and actually and do some major work there. So although not a full demolition, it is significantly demolished for all intents and purposes. You saw this from Ted, the criteria for reviewing classification change. We're not going to pursue the second one here. The changes were made since the original survey. We're hanging our hat on the fact that an error was made on the original survey or a mistake in classification. Also, I'd point out that the code actually says that the criteria include but are not limited to, suggesting that there are other criteria, although unlisted in the code. I want to point you to the standard for contributing, that there are two pieces of this standard. First, that it was present during the period of significance and possesses historic integrity, or that it individually meets the National Register eligibility criteria. In this case, there's no dispute. It doesn't meet the National Register eligibility criteria individually. There's also no dispute that it was present during this period of significance. It all comes down to whether the historic integrity of this home remains intact. In Boise City Code, again, integrity is the ability of a property to convey its significance. These concepts are key to integrity. Their location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. Just a quick chart, rather than going through each of them at length, put this together. The integrity of location, yeah, that's met. It absolutely is. The location of this home has not changed since 1949. The integrity of the setting, the neighborhood layout and the use are also unchanged since 1949. I'd point out that almost every home that existed during the period of significance in the North End meets those two criteria. Those are not unique to the Stefanikos home. The rest of the elements, though, of integrity are not met in this case. I want to go through and the first one I want to hit, obviously, is integrity of design. But before I do that, I want to point to a quote from the Design Guidelines for Residential Historic Districts. Though a property does not necessarily have to possess all 7 points of integrity to be considered historic, it should possess or reflect most of them. Going back here, it only possesses 2. It lacks design integrity. Pointing to the Sanborn maps that were mentioned, the important ones are the 1949 and the 1956. The 1949 because it's at the end of the period of significance and sets a baseline for subsequent changes. You can see here that in 1949, the porch was here and the front door was located here. These slashes don't indicate front door or where the door is. They actually indicate where that the home is largely built of fireproof construction, but with a wood roof. And these over here indicate 1 story. If you looking at this porch, you can see on the 1956 outside the period of significance, it was not, it was removed after the period of significance. And if you look at the sketch that's on the Ada County Assessor's webpage now, you can see that the porch has been re-added at some point since 1956. This, I think, provides a little bit better description or depiction of what's happened. I'll note for you, though, that this is flipped 180 degrees. So just to confuse you a little bit about which end is up. The front here is right here on the bottom, facing 6th Street. You can see that the porch was removed after 1949. It was added actually after 1956 on this side of the home. The door, which faced forward here, was not just relocated, it was reoriented and now faces the home to the right of the house. So integrity of design was not met. It also lacks integrity of materials. The materials are very different from what were there in 1949. In addition to the original windows being replaced with aluminum windows, they've used unmatched, prior to Bob purchasing the home, unmatched siding has been used to repair the sides of the home, and second-rate decorative elements have been added. And you'll see what you saw what that looks like in the pictures that Ted showed. Also, the workmanship is bad in that and it lacks integrity of workmanship in that as these different sections have been built, taken off, relocated, overbuilt, much of the workmanship is pretty shoddy. And you can see that from close up. I also want to hit the integrity of feeling. This is a tough one to describe. As mentioned on this table, the scale, the massing, the design and the materials, and the character of the home all have changed since 1949. More than that, though, this home, it has a cuteness. And in talking with architects about how we were going to approach this, they all said the biggest hurdle you're going to have to overcome with the Historic Preservation Commission and with the City Council is that this home is cute, and it is from a distance. I would suggest that it lacks feeling, though. It's like if you wanted to go to Paris, but instead you went to Las Vegas and stayed at the Paris. instead of going to Europe. It just has a kitsch that's not historic. It's like the owner prior to Bob went to Hobby Lobby and bought artificially distressed and aged ornaments and hung them on the outside of the house. The last one here, integrity of association, and that's easy. No historically significant person or event is associated with the home. Ted covered the basis for error. I'm not going to go too deeply into that. I want to cover the reasons given by the Historic Preservation Commission for their denial. These are comments made by members of the commission.
I just want to, in case you can't see the time, because I know the applicant wants to speak as well, you've got 2.5 minutes left.
Thank you very much. One of the comments was that if the period of significance ended in 1970 instead of 1949, the changes to the home would be within the period of significance. None of these are valid basis for denial. One of the other ones was that the significant changes to the home could be reversed and it could be returned to its original appearance. Those are not basis for denying this application. Also wanted to point, although the staff has said several times that the Sanborn fire insurance maps were included with the survey, this is a copy of the survey, and I'll note for you here that at the bottom, where it's listed what Sanborn fire insurance maps were considered, it only has one. I'll grant that the city's current file includes all of those additional Sanborn maps, but according to the survey, they only reviewed the 1903 Sanborn fire insurance map, meaning that they didn't have the other ones with them. Additionally, there's no building permits listed here, although there are 3 post-era or period of significance in the city's file now. It's the later ones that are the most important, the ones that are after the period of significance, because they show those changes. I've got a minute left. I'm gonna let Bob say a few words.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I thank you for hearing our appeal. Again, I just want to reiterate, I purchased this home back in 2001, shortly after the historic district was established. I have since grown my family. I'm a contributing member to the city. I'm a special ed teacher. My wife's a teacher in the Boise district as well. We've been there for 20 years almost, and we want to stay there. And we would like to see these errors corrected. There are major changes done to this house. And yes, it is a cute house from a distance, but if you go inside and you see the ornament things that they've done, the construction's not worth saving. And we are fully prepared, and we want to put a new home there, add on whatever we need to do in order to keep it the aesthetics of the neighborhood. We've been there, we love it. That's why we're there, is the aesthetics. So we're just asking that we look at the facts and we don't look at assumptions. And so I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant/appellant?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question for the applicant/appellant's counsel. If you wouldn't mind going back a couple of slides to the slide you had entitled Standard of Review. Or basis for error, I'm sorry, you were there. Can you just give me in 30 seconds your best argument under one of these particular statutory provisions? What's your best shot?
Absolutely. The best shot that I have here is that the commission's decision was arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion, in that it was made without a rational basis. And the basis for that argument is that the face of the inventory that was performed in 1999 indicates that only one Sanborn map was reviewed. And subsequently, apparently, there was additional information added to the city's file, but it was not corrected. There is no evidence or no fact in the record to suggest that to counter the evidence on the face of that inventory, that only the 1903 Sanborn map was considered.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Go on.
Let's go first with the council president, and then I think that was Councilmember Halliburton.
thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question is also for Josh. It's this, at any time during this process, I know as I look back through the record, you assumed that the staff should conduct a second survey. At any time during this process, did you consider just paying for a second survey and taking it to the SHPO and getting it certified?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council President Clegg. Yes, and due to time constraints and also financial constraints, didn't go that route. I appreciated your questions earlier about the time and the delay that would happen after this application were it to be, were the application to continue to be denied. And that's something we would consider going forward.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
question for appellant Bob, actually, and then council may want to jump in, but I start with Bob. Bob, first, thanks for you and your wife's occupation as teachers. I think it's a really challenging time to be a teacher right now, and I can't imagine a special ed teacher the challenges that you're having to overcome there. So, thank you. My question, I guess, is so when you moved into the house, you understood that it was in a historic district. And I guess my question is, did you understand it was a historic district then, and you've changed your mind because now you've gotten to know the house and you've looked at the integrity of materials and design and you've changed your mind because you know the house better? Is that what you're arguing?
Well, I think it was twofold. It was brand new. I was 31 years old. It's the first house I've ever bought. I got a notice that it was historic, but I didn't even know the difference between contributing, non-contributing. And then, yes, as I've gotten to know the house and know my neighbors, because one of my neighbors actually thought about buying it, but knew how much money it was going to take to get it into good shape. And we love the house. We love our area. And we just are looking for the opportunity to stay where we are. But no, quite frankly, my realtor, no one told me what I was getting into, and I didn't know enough because it was brand new. I mean, I bought it in 2001. The district was established in 99, I believe. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob. I bought my house at about the same age, and I know what you're saying. So just to follow up, I guess, with council. So I guess kind of what Bob was talking about there a little bit. What you're saying is that when you look at this house from the outside, it looks like a cute historic house. But then when you start looking at the changes that have happened, the bones on the inside, when you take a closer look, the integrity of design is no longer there. The integrity of the materials is no longer there. And that may not be something that you would see just from the picture, but after a closer look, after living there for an extended period of time, that's what your assumptions are.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Halliburton, I think our argument is a little bit different than that. Our argument isn't based on the time that he's been there. Rather, our argument is based on the fact that the changes that have occurred have been to the exterior front, the facade of this home, and are readily apparent from looking at the home, but only if you have the right documents in front of you to show what those changes have been since the period of significance ended. If you don't have those, or if you don't have a baseline during the period of significance to know what it looked like then, it just looks like a North End home. But with all that documentation in hand, it changes your perspective, and you can see that it isn't a contributing home, and that design integrity has not been maintained.
And Madam Mayor, just one follow-up, and this may be again for council or it may be for staff. So when the house was evaluated, when somebody came and evaluated it, did they determine that it had that integrity of workmanship, of materials, of design still?
That's a really good question. So there are a couple of ways to look at that. The first is that they determined that it did have that integrity of design because they determined that it was contributing. With that said, our main argument is that they didn't have the documentation necessary to be able to show that all of these changes occurred after that period of significance, so that it isn't actually contributing. The other way to look at it is that they checked the wrong box, that there was a mistake made, a simple human error as opposed to a substantive mistake.
Thank you. And then I guess just to staff, the same question, if I could. Is it interpreted from the evaluation that took place that it did have that integrity of workmanship, materials, design when that evaluation was done? Or is that able to be determined from that report?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Halliburton, it is assumed that when the house was evaluated by the consultant that they determined it did meet most of those factors or most of those criteria to establish it as contributing.
And then Ted, I'm sorry to take up so much time here, but so Ted, when you are talking about the integrity of materials and design, are we typically talking about the actual bones, frame, structure of the house, or would a porch relocation and a door relocation, are there circumstances where that would trigger the lack of integrity of design on an outward porch or just an entryway?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Halliburton, yeah, so the design, workmanship or craftsmanship would be the bones of the structure, including the porch. Materials might include siding and windows and stuff like that. As far as, yeah, typically, you know, if somebody were to come to us and ask to remove a porch on a contributing house, that would have to go to the commission and almost certainly it would be denied because the porch is considered a significant factor on the design of a home. I think what the Historic Commission determined here is that the style of the house as a vernacular structure, which means essentially that it was constructed using, you know, local materials, local design concepts, that it's still, even with the porch moved or removed, it still held on to that vernacular style and design that kept it contributing. You know, if this were a house that was more a more traditional styled house, like a craftsman house or a Queen Anne or a Tudor style house, the porch or the entry may have been seen as really a critical component of that structure. But in this case, I think you know, the commission determined that with the vernacular design, the vernacular style of the house is still intact, even though the porch has been moved or relocated.
All right, thank you, Ted.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask one question that I think maybe corrects a misperception that happened during this questioning. Ted, while the surveys were done in 1999, the historic district was not established until 2000. Can't remember if it was late 2004 or early 2005, but when Mr. Stepkanos bought this home, it was not in an historic district. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, yeah, the surveys are typically the first step or one of the first steps to be done when creating a new historic district. So the surveys help us determine the integrity of a potential historic district. How many contributing structures do we actually have? How many historic structures do we have? So that's done first. So that was done, you know, in 1999. And usually the historic district, then when all that documentation is gathered, it goes to the commission and it goes to city council. So, right, you're correct. I think the district was actually established prior to that, prior to 2004. I believe it was 2000 or 2001, but I would have to check on that. But You're correct.
I will tell you that I voted on it and I wasn't elected until 2004.
Okay.
Thank you.
Council President, you voted on making that part of the North End a historic district once you were on the council?
Yes, that was one of the first things that we did.
Okay. If there aren't other questions, we'll move on. Is a representative North End Neighborhood Association on the line?
Madam Mayor, no one is raising their hand.
And no other individuals as well?
Correct.
All right. If the record would reflect that nobody has signed up in advance. Anybody in the room for this topic? Sorry. Nope. And nobody in the room is here for this. So with that, are there any further questions for staff or the applicant? I'll go ahead and close the hearing if not. Okay. Hearing is closed. Yes, go ahead.
I move that we deny the appeal DRH 20-294 at 1316 North 6th Street.
Second.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
This is my old neighborhood, and Bob and Jen were my old neighbors, and I adore them so very much. And having lived in one of these little 1940s vernaculars for many years and starting our family there, we also saw the limitations with the house and ended up having to leave the neighborhood that we loved so dearly. But these little vernaculars, what's that?
I made a mistake and moved to close the hearing without rebuttal from the
Oh, I'm
applicant.
so
So I'm gonna go rewind. My bad, and open it up for Josh to give, what do we have for rebuttal? A 5-minute rebuttal, and then we will start again. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
No,
I'm going to share my screen again, or try to, just one moment. Okay, is that up there? Okay, there we go.
Yes.
I'm gonna speed ahead a little bit here. I want to show you a couple of pictures because if you can see that on here, on the left is a home that was in a 1993 survey for the North End Historic District that was correctly classified as non-contributing and exists as non-contributing today. On the right is the Stefanikis' home, which was incorrectly classified as contributing. The reason I want to show this to you is that the home on the left is likely exactly what the Stefanikos' home looked like during the period of significance, with the home facing with the eave to the right, the door facing forward and on the left side, and a small porch. Over time, after the period of significance, it became what you see on the right, which is a significantly different appearance than what it was back then. I show you that because, again, the home on the left was classified as non-contributing 3 blocks over, whereas this one was incorrectly classified as contributing. I also want to go back to Council President Clegg's question, and I apologize, I was a little bit flustered when you asked. I was trying to speak to it. One of the reasons we didn't go and hire a new consultant to do a new survey, we were struck by the fact that there's not a requirement on the application to include that, and I strongly suggest if that's going to be a basis for denial going forward, including a point on that application to provide a new survey. We believed at the time and still believe that we had found sufficient error on the face of that 1999 survey in the fact that they weren't, and it's not an intentional error. It's a mistake, or even they just didn't have the documentation from 1956 and those building permits from later to be able to determine that the changes had occurred. As you can see from the pictures, the way it looked then and the way it looked now are very different. I'd also note that there were, as Ted mentioned, there were 4 emails not just in support, but in adamant support of this for the Stephanicoses. This is a situation where, as I mentioned earlier, they have the ability under their existing permit, their certificate of appropriateness, to take this house down to the studs. It's just a matter of I believe it's about $60,000 more to do it that way, as opposed to proposing an entirely new structure. If that $60,000 achieved the benefit and preserved the appearance of the house in a historic way or of a contributing structure, they would be all for it. That's the way they are. However, $60,000 to completely eliminate everything that you see in the picture and only leave the studs, it just doesn't make sense to them. And hopefully they are not priced out of this neighborhood. Hopefully they're able to stay here and raise their home raise their family in the only home that they've known. And ask you to reverse and approve the application.
All right, thank you. And again, sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, is this the right time to restate my motion?
Yeah, let's restate it. And
Okay.
then you can begin again.
I'm going to take a second crack at this. Madam Mayor, I move to deny DRH 20-294, the appeal of the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of a certificate of appropriateness request to reclassify the contributing single-family structure to non-contributing at 1316 North 6th Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Madam Mayor, I'll just kind of blip back and rewind a little bit. So again, I used to live in this neighborhood and I know Bob and Jen well. And we had, it was just a few months ago that we had another vernacular in the North End that was, almost the identical situation. And our job is to figure out if there was an error on the side of Historic Preservation Commission in denying the certificate of appropriateness. And I don't believe there was. If we need to have a larger conversation around the role of vernaculars in the North End, and if we consider them worthy of preservation, then we should have that conversation as a Historic Preservation Commission with our historic preservation community members. But absent that, and not seeing any mistake by our Historic Preservation Commission members who are subject matter experts, I see no reason to uphold the appeal.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I'll start by being really frank. I don't care for some of the ways that our historic preservation rules inhibit people's abilities to stay in the home that they own, or to renovate it in a way that will allow them to, continue in their home. And $60,000 is a lot of money, and $60,000 is an amount of money that this North End family will have to spend in order to uphold our historic preservation rules. And that is really troublesome to me. At the same time, we have the rules and we have the laws, and we have them because presumably we've had this conversation and decided that cost benefit is worth it. And we may in the future have that conversation again and decide it differently. Sitting here, the important thing to do is apply the rules fairly and not substitute my discretion or my judgment or my set of personal political beliefs about private property for what the law says. And what the law says is, absent an error by the Historic Preservation Commission, we should affirm their decision. The best argument was that, on the face of the inventory, only one map was used when in fact there were others, and that additional information was available, but the survey wasn't corrected. That argument relies on it being true that the survey would be corrected and the conclusion would have changed with the addition of that information. And that's kind of a hypothetical what may have happened if that additional information was there at the time of the survey. The Historic Preservation Commission concluded that the survey wouldn't have changed and the home would have been contributing, and that was its judgment. There are some arguments and suggestions as to why it may have concluded differently, but its conclusion isn't an abuse of discretion in that it had no rational basis. I can see the rational basis for its decision, and so under the standard of review that we have to follow, it's our job to affirm their decision.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. There's no way I can say this any better than Councilmember Bajan just did. I agree with everything that he just stated, and I agree with the points made by Council Pro Tem Woodings as well. I mean, this is a very tough one for me. I certainly believe in the rights to, update your home. This is also the very reason, outside of the price of the North End, that I would never live in a historic district. But that aside, I certainly feel for the individual that lives in this home, because I would likely want to make improvements myself. We have these rules in place at the historic district, and they're tough, and they go along with living in the historic district. And at the end of the day, we have to decide if there was an error made, and based on the sound analysis just provided by Councilmember Bajan, there is no error. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure where the vote's going, but this is one I'm very torn on. I was in fact a member of this council when we voted to establish this historic district. I was a member of the public advocating for it before that, and helped advocate to get the surveys done. Those surveys were done, to my knowledge, pretty meticulously. There were a lot of people watching when that happened. And it's true that I've watched this neighborhood, I live not very far away, lose all of its, what one would consider working class buildings over the last few years. And it does over time change the character of the neighborhood. And if the purpose of a historic district is to protect that character, I think losing at least the outline and the size, dimensions, setbacks of these vernacular homes does in fact change that character. This family does have the permission to take this down to the studs and rebuild it. I recognize that the extra cost of that might be prohibitive. I don't want them to lose their ability to live in this neighborhood. I also know that a lot of us did a lot of our own work in order to stay in this neighborhood originally. And we did that because the character of those buildings was something that we did want to preserve. So while I'm torn, I think the arguments that Councilmember Bajan voiced are certainly true. I can't find this decision to be arbitrary or capricious. I think as I read through the discussion and the testimony, the Historic Preservation Commission did a very good job of considering all of the evidence and making a rational decision based on that evidence. Doesn't matter if I agree with that or not, frankly. What matters is that they, as the experts on historic preservation, considered all that evidence and came to a conclusion that can be supported by that evidence. And so I'll be voting with the motion.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll be voting with the motion as well. I think like everyone else, I'm a little bit torn. I may be for slightly different reasons. In that I don't know if it's contributing or not. There's some things that I heard that I think are a little bit alarming, things that have been done to this house that wouldn't be allowed to be done to any other house at this point of time, or likely wouldn't be allowed for these houses. But at the same time, there was an evaluation that was done on the house by someone who knows a lot more about this than I do. That evaluation was examined by the Historic Commission, who has a lot more experience with this than I do. And if they are finding, if that's the finding that they have, and it meets those 7 different criteria, or most of those 7 criteria, then I'm going to have to go along with that. I guess, one of the things that I think try to do in situations like this is try to make sure that we let people know what their options are going forward. And whether that's something that happens here tonight or at a later date, I would certainly be interested in knowing what those additional options going forward are, whether it's an additional evaluation that can be reapplied, whether it is a different way of remodeling the house or whatever it may be. But I will be voting with the motion.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Council President Clegg. This is hard because, the North End is special, and part of what makes it special is the moves that electeds like Council President Clegg made to protect its character. But we're also talking about people, and never has the importance of people been made more clear than this year. And I echo Councilmember Halliburton's thanks to this family for taking up a very noble profession as teachers. And again, what a time to be a teacher in 2020. But I also know we have to make choices in life. And I too had to make a choice in the early 2000s when I purchased my home. I wanted a cute old home too. I would have loved to have purchased a home in the North End, but I had to be practical. And so my practical choice was to have new construction in one of those controversial tall skinny houses near Boise State. But yeah, I knew that if I chose the other route to have a cute little bungalow, little cottage in the North End, that there might be consequences for that on down the road. And I've never had a job that made a lot of money, much like a teacher. And so I had to make that choice to go the practical route. So what I'm hoping is that since we are having these come before us, and there seems to be some heartache in some of this decision making, I'm hoping that we will find ways to improve the process, to take a closer look at the situation so that we can embrace a third way. So I too will be supporting the motion tonight.
All right. I think that has been everyone. I'll just say I won't be voting, it looks like, but I do think that there's some merit in looking at aside from one particular item, I'm looking at the rules and the guidelines as they're written, and to see if, and the classifications of contributing, to see if inadvertently there aren't more potential issues in the future that we'd want to avoid. Because it's ironic in this case with a house that can be taken down to the studs. It's a vernacular house, the working class house that we're trying to protect in the North End, but it becomes harder and harder for working class people to live in the houses that were working class houses, and you lose that part of the character of the neighborhood, or you risk that and I think that could in fact be an inadvertent impact of the work that was done to protect the character of the neighborhood. So something the Historic Commission, and together with council, it sounds like there's some interest we might want to have a conversation about in the long run. And with that, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
We're going to take a 5-minute break because it's almost 7:30, which is when we tend to break. And then we'll have the last item of the night. And Councilman Thompson, and you can run your dog. Was that your dog making some little yip noises?
Yes, I will.
Give your dog a break. We'll be back in 5 minutes to pick up the last item. Thanks all. Yeah, I'm going to. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I need to ask everybody to have your masks on over your nose if you wish to remain in chambers. Masks need to be on over your nose if you wish to remain in the chambers. Okay, so next up we have CAA 20-127, an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of a wireless communication facility at 601 North 27th Street. First up, we have Cody. I see you, Cody, on Zoom. Then we'll start with the appellant, Harry Lehman, and Kathy Cook. Are you in person or online?
This is Kathy Cook. I'm online, and my legal counsel had an emergency and was not able to make it tonight, so it will be just me.
I'm sorry. Well, thank you for joining us remotely. Next up, we'll have the applicant, Melissa Regan. Melissa, also online? And then the Neighborhood Association of Record is the West End, Jason Durand. And then I have people that signed up in advance in both online. We'll start with people in the room. There are two people that signed up in the room that are not parties of record, so I just want to bring this up now. We've done our research, so if you disagree, then we'll need to have a distanced conversation about it. Heather Chambers and David, is it Minor or Misner? Yeah. A party of record in an appeal means if you want to testify in an appeal, then you had to have testified in the first. Okay, all right. And you, sir? Okay, so you're reading a letter under the name of a party of record. So we'll confirm he's a party of record, and that is okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So Cody, let's go ahead and get started.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but I wonder if I could put something on the record before we start as a matter of personal privilege. We've gotten some letters saying that City Council has met with Verizon, but has refused to meet with advocates for regulating 5G. And I'd like to clear up any part that I have in that. I did, in fact, meet with a Verizon representative on August 31st, but it was not about 5G. He's a representative that lives and works in Spokane and was just hired as the new community relations person for them. Because of COVID and the difficulty that many of our nonprofits have been having, I had a meeting with him to see if there was any opportunity for community grants or community-based philanthropy that might help some of those nonprofits out of the organization that he runs within Verizon. we did not talk about 5G. On August 6th, however, I did meet with advocates who would prefer to see more regulation of 5G. I met with David DeHaas and 2 other advocates, and we discussed all kinds of issues that they believe are true around 5G and ways that they believe cities could regulate the location of that. It was before this appeal was filed. It was before I had any knowledge that this might be appealed. And so I would say it was not ex parte communication concerning this particular application. It was broad communication around the issue in general. So I just wanted to clear up that, yes, in fact, I have met with advocates, and yes, in fact, I did meet with Verizon, but it was not around 5G. It was around community philanthropy. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. All right, Cody.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yes, and we see your
Okay.
slides.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's kind of a little different format again this evening, so I apologize for any trouble in advance. Madam Mayor, members of council, this item is an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of a wireless communication facility located at 601 North 27th Street, as you noted. The commission essentially in approving the facility upheld the July approval of the installation by the planning staff. That approval did allow the installation of a 5G antenna on the street light pole, slightly modified as you can see here. As detailed in your packet, this kind of installation is administratively allowed. That being said, the decision has been appealed, and I would like to just briefly respond to the grounds. First, the appellant suggests that we violated our own code and that a propagation study wasn't included in the original submittal. That is actually true. The applicant didn't originally include a propagation study. I would note, though, this is a new technology with these 5G antennas. We essentially, at that point, effectively have no coverage throughout much of the city. The code is really based on traditional towers and older technology, and not this newer technology. That being said, as you know, there is an open record at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the applicant did provide subsequently a propagation study, as you can see here. It's clear there is a gap in what is otherwise almost non-existent coverage in this area. The appellant also believes that gap might only apply to phone or text coverage and not data. The city code or development code does not currently make that distinction. And so in summary, with this ground, if there was an error in that original administrative action, we do believe it was remedied through the Planning and Zoning Commission process. The next ground, the appellant believes we should be looking at environmental impacts as it relates to 5G installation. They do contend that I believe you'll hear that we are not preempted by the FCC. We've looked at that carefully, actually, a number of times along with our own legal counsel, and are confident that we are in fact preempted. And even if we're wrong, it is not a current standard of our development code. That NEPA review is a federal standard, and again, not a local standard in our development code. So if it's deficient, it's that through the federal system that it would need to be challenged. Regardless, the ground does not reflect an error in our local decision. Next, the appellant believes that additional written analysis to support the installation should have been required. It is true that there was minimal written information included in that original application, but again, our code really is based on some of that older technology and doesn't necessarily reflect 5G installations perfectly. It really, however, the code does promote installations precisely like the one that is proposed and was approved by the commission. However, like the propagation study, if there was any error in this regard, it was remedied at the Planning and Zoning Commission with an additional letter of explanation provided to the commission. Again, the purpose of that open record at the commission is to try and resolve any sort of discrepancies in that regard, and we do believe that occurred. The final ground, the appellant is also based on what the appellant believes is appellant has a different interpretation of federal law. They believe there is some sort of some distinction between phone, text, and internet or broadband as it relates to telecommunications, and suggest that that gives us the authority to consider again those environmental or health impacts. We've consulted with our own legal counsel and simply don't believe that to be the case. And again, like the other ground, even if proven true, it's not currently a requirement of city code and would not demonstrate an error in the decision that has occurred. So in closing, my comments, I want to be clear, not intended to downplay the appellant's concern. The fact is that we actually have a very, very narrow focus here and are quite limited in what we can actually consider. So based on that and the current standards of the code, we don't see where there's been an error and are recommending denial of this appeal this evening. I would note, just as a reminder, the mayor touched on it, that testimony this evening is limited to parties of record in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. Any questions for Cody? No? Yeah, I'm sorry. Right now, council's asking questions, and then we'll hear from the appellant and applicant, and then when, oh, no, that's okay. Yeah, it wasn't clear. I was staring at the council members who are on the screen. But yeah, so this is just for council right now. That's okay. All right. It looks like there aren't further questions, so we will now have the appellant join us from Zoom. Kathy?
Thank you. Can I share my screen here? I've got just a few slides I wanted to show.
Great, thanks, Kathy. And we've got it, but I just need to ask you to state your name and address for the record as you get going too.
Sure. Yes, Kathy Cook, address is 688 North 29th Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. And so thank you, Mrs. Mayor and City Council members, for taking the time to hear our appeal this evening. I know that you've had an extraordinary year, and I'm grateful for your time and consideration in this matter. I should state, however, that I am very disappointed with the refusal to meet with the many citizens that have made countless requests to discuss this issue. I share the mayor's democratic views and visions of this great city, and after enthusiastically voting for her, I'm extremely disappointed that neither her nor her staff is upholding due process for its constituents. So last month, I submitted a letter to each of you requesting a meeting about this topic, and I received a canned response from the mayor stating, and I quote, "We know there are alarming things said about 5G on the internet. We have seen them too," unquote. Personally, I find this statement to be very offensive and condescending. The canned response continued to say, "As per restrictions placed on all local governments in Idaho relating to installation of 5G by the Federal Communications Commission, the city may not consider the health impacts of radio frequency radiation when deciding whether to approve an application for a 5G tower." All of you have received this email, and you will note that I did not mention anything about health impacts whatsoever. So either the letter was not read or the substantial fact and law that I did reference were simply dismissed. I did, however, state relevant facts about the law and how the city has disregarded their own city development code. And I'm not here to discuss the alarming things that I've seen about 5G on the internet, but rather where the city has fallen short in its duties and how they failed to protect the public, and to give you the basic legal facts that your colleagues have failed to understand. So I am an electromagnetic radiation specialist, and I get my information from my instructors who are electrical engineers, licensed electricians, physicists, medical doctors, and PhDs. I do not consult Google for the information I'm providing you with tonight. I should note here that the planning and zoning staff has admitted multiple times that they are not experts in radio frequency. This is important to note because your staff are drawing conclusions and making decisions without the necessary knowledge to do so. I should remind you that I am an expert in radio frequency, and I assure you that the decisions from both your staff and legal counsel are not based in fact and law, but rather the heavily influenced wireless industry playbook that seeks to and has apparently succeeded in giving you false information so that they get to do whatever they choose without the nuisance of local control of which is entirely within your jurisdiction. With that understood, there's only 3 points that I need to discuss tonight. Number one is the approval of this application is in direct violation of Boise City Development Code, as Mr. Riddle already has demonstrated. The application was approved without a propagation study. What's even more concerning is that the applicant did provide a so-called propagation study only after the approval of the application. It is critical for you to note that this so-called propagation study that was submitted has no value or substance whatsoever. This is not a propagation study. A propagation model means that a mathematical formulation for the characterization of radio wave propagation as a function of the frequency, distance, and other conditions should be supplied. You will see that nowhere on this document is there any mathematical formulation. There's no information about when it was completed, the date, the instrumentation used, or any qualifying information whatsoever. In fact, this document actually has no merit whatsoever, as the intent of a propagation study is to determine that there is a significant gap in coverage of covered services only. Covered services per federal law 47 USC 253 and 332C7 are for voice and text services only. It does not include, as per federal law, data, email, streaming, self-driving cars, telemedicine, or any other service outside of the ability to make phone calls or send a text. This document does not provide any information whatsoever regarding this covered service, yet your planning and zoning staff has stated that this documentation was sufficient. So as Mr. Riddle implied, there is the difference between Title I and Title II when it comes to the FCC guidelines. And this is important to note. The planning and zoning staff has admitted that they do not know the difference between Title I and Title II. And so you should note that Title I services per federal law are about data streaming, email, telemedicine, and other advanced technologies. They are not regulated by the FCC. 5G small cells are not intended for phone calls. They are intended for data. Title I services are not regulated by the FCC. Only Title II is regulated by the FCC, and Title II is about phone calls and texts. So if the wireless applicant cannot prove a significant gap in coverage for phone calls and texts, then this application can absolutely be denied by the city. The onus is on the applicant to prove there is a gap in coverage. This so-called propagation study attempts a guess of coverage that may be provided by 5G technology, which, as I have demonstrated, is about data, not phone calls and texts. Okay. So the telecommunication industry would like all localities, including the city of Boise, to believe that they have no power over local siting issues. This is not true. I am not talking about health effects. What I am talking about is the right that you have to deny an application based on the lack of required documentation, like an actual propagation study and an excess of effective radiated power emissions from a facility. This WCF application was approved without any documentation whatsoever as to the specific technology that would be used. I'm going to go through my slides here because I don't have enough time. There is no information about the effective radiated power in these slides whatsoever. As you will see in the document files, the antennas listed are TBD, meaning the antennas that they listed aren't even listed in the application documents. They are to be determined. Therefore, your staff is approving this technology without even knowing what the effective radiated power is. this is not in alignment with FCC guidelines. And this is true for about all 150 applications plus that have been approved to date. I have yet to see an application where the antennas are actually listed. This is a major, major liability for the city because these are being approved without any of the effective radiated power being known. So again, I want to remind the city of its liability in this. And in short, your staff and legal counsel have demonstrated that they do not have a solid understanding of the federal communication guidelines, nor are they experts in radio frequency, as we would not expect them to be. What we would expect, however, is that you consult with independent experts free from the indoctrination that the industry has so easily imposed on you. If you had responded even once to our numerous requests for information, we could have worked together to impart this information with you and your staff and to ensure a safe, aesthetically pleasing, and energy efficient community that we all want. Now that you have this information, I look forward to your reasonable enforcement of the law as pertaining to the WCF application submitted from now on. I also look forward to your approval of this appeal as it clearly did not meet Boise City Development Code, and because no information regarding the effective radiated power is listed in this or any other WCF application, it does not meet FCC guidelines. I have expressed no matter of mere concern or any other non-substantive matter, but solely matters of substance, of fact, and law. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Kathy. Any questions for Ms. Cook? All right. Next up, we will have the applicant. I have Melissa Regan. Oh, good. I didn't see you earlier, so I'm glad you're here. Oh, but you were muted, ma'am. You're muted. And will you give us your name and address for the record as you get going? Shoot, nope. Now, you're unmuted. It might just mean that you have the wrong speaker tied to it right now. Oh, I saw that. Let me ask the clerk if that's possible. Try now. No, we can't hear you yet. But you unmuted her phone? So your phone has been, you can hear us, I take it? Maybe not.
Madam Mayor, she has to unmute.
All right, okay. There we go. That's it. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. It's better on my audio than my computer system. And to that end, I'll introduce myself and then I will turn off my video just because I also have the lag with the PowerPoint. But Melissa Reagan, appearing on behalf of the applicant Verizon Wireless, serve as outside counsel with Sherman and Howard, 633 17th Street, Suite 3000, Denver, Colorado. And I appreciate you. Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members, for allowing me to present to you this evening. I'm going to stop my video and then if I can share my screen. So I will not spend a lot of time rehashing. We agree with the city staff's report and recommendation that the city council deny the appeal. We also submitted written arguments to the city council, both on October 8th as our affirmative arguments, as well as in response to appellant's written submission on October 15th. So those include several of our arguments and responses, including the legal citations and the like that we'll be talking about during our presentation this evening. We are available to answer any questions that the City Council may have. Jason Evans is also on behalf of Verizon Wireless, the site consultant who is available to answer any questions the City Council may have. Cody did an excellent job of kind of presenting the permit application process, so I won't spend time on that. I wanted to jump in and address some of the issues that the appellant has raised. But first, just want to recap the Boise Planning and Zoning Commission's written decision that they stated on the record that the grounds for appeal do not demonstrate an error in the planning team's decision. And while certain submittal documents were initially missing, they have since been received and have been found to comply with the Boise City Code. And as Mr. Riddle informed the City Council, that is a permitted application that is allowed to happen. The Planning and Zoning Commission can consider new evidence that wasn't previously in the record in its decision to uphold the permit issuance and deny the appeal. And as they stated, while the appellant has included grounds for the appeal, they had failed to demonstrate any error in the administrative decision and how the application does not comply with the minimum criteria established by the Boise City Code. And I think that's a really important point to consider here, is that that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at the code established by the Boise City Code, not the FCC or federal requirements. And so I want to frame this for you as to what the legal standard is for the City Council's review of this matter. So the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision to deny the appeal is a presumptively valid decision, and the City Council must give deference to that decision, and it cannot grant an appeal unless it's committed a specific error. And those are 4 different errors, which the appellant has not demonstrated that any of those errors exist in the record. We do not have any violation of constitutional, state, or city law. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not exceed its statutory authority, and it also did not make any unlawful procedure decisions. And finally, its decision was not arbitrary or capricious without a rational basis. I do want to just spend a few minutes talking about why this site is needed and why Verizon is expanding the wireless network. And this is particularly important in the times we're living in right now with COVID. We have 80% of all small businesses are using and supporting more small cell deployment. 80% of 911 calls are made from wireless devices. 90% of US households are using wireless services, with almost 57% of households only having wireless service, not having a landline. And in today of the world of COVID-19 in particular, this really has brought to the forefront the importance of wireless services. As you'll see, just from 2019 to 2020, we have a significant expansion of the types of products, applications, and services that are used. I mean, I think one of the quotes that I've heard that has really exemplified the need for wireless services is that broadband really is the new necessary school supply. With COVID-19, we've got the work from home for so many businesses, the telemedicine services that we need to support and provide our wireless services for. We talked about capacity, that 5G is more of a capacity site than it is necessarily coverage, site coverage, meaning the calls that you make from your phone. But this site itself is both a 4G and 5G site. So it's supporting the infrastructure that's already in existence of our 4G LTE network, which does provide coverage services as well as capacity. And so we just talk about how much capacity each of these sites can handle, and it only has a limited amount. Smartphones are taking up 50 times the amount of network capacity as a standard phone. And so in order to meet our services, we've got to deploy in these areas. just to provide a little bit more of an explanation on the propagation map that the appellant spent some time on, green means wireless service is good, yellow means wireless service needs to be improved, gray means wireless service needs to be bad. Now, you heard the appellant mention that these propagation studies are not sufficient in order to meet the requirements of the Boise Code. Well, first, contrary to the representations by the appellant, coverage and capacity are both regulated by the FCC. It is not just a coverage issue. In fact, federal law preempts when dealing with wireless communication facilities that provide both voice and data services. In 2018, the FCC issued an order accelerating broadband and wireless services with the purpose of the order, and it brought data and capacity facilities under the umbrella of the Telecommunications Act, Section 332, C7, through the emphasis on commingled services is the term they used, and that provides both personal wireless services of coverage as well as mobile broadband internet access and capacity. And while Verizon did not provide mathematical formulations used for these coverage maps and capacity maps, they certainly are underlying those formulas that the RF engineers were not required to provide that as part of the city code. And I'll note that the city council has to consider what is in the record before it. The appellant has not provided any propagation map that demonstrates there is sufficient coverage or capacity for this area, nor did they provide an expert or their own analysis. Verizon provided these maps, they complied with the city code, and that's the evidence the city council has before it to consider tonight. I'll just state that we've met all of the legal requirements, as Mr. Riddle already stated what the city code required. We provided the propagation maps and the written analysis, while it was after the fact that is permitted under the Boise City Code to provide that as part of the open record. The Boise Planning and Zoning Department and the Commission said that both of these were sufficient and that they demonstrated the information they needed to in order to comply with the code. The appellant mentioned that federal law does not require a significant gap in coverage, or that it requires a significant gap in coverage, not capacity. And that's actually incorrect. The FCC no longer applies a significant gap in coverage to determine whether there was an effective prohibition of wireless services under the Telecommunications Act. Again, going back to the 2018 FCC order, which was just upheld by the Ninth Circuit, it states that the coverage gap-based approaches are not compatible with where the world we are today and the types of facilities that are being deployed to add network capacity. As Mr. Riddle mentioned, the code as it exists today really kind of still focuses on the macro facilities that we were looking at previously and hasn't been brought into play with the updated technologies and types of services that wireless providers are deploying these days. There was a lot of information in the appellant submissions that the Boise Code, they should have received NEPA reviews or additional RF information. To be clear, the Boise Code does not require that type of information. It's not one of the required documentations the applicant was required to produce. More importantly is that under federal law, it really is preempted. The Congress has granted the FCC the authority to regulate RF admissions, and the proper procedure if there's an issue with respect to the NEPA review or RF powers is for the appellant to file a petition with the FCC. The Planning and Zoning Commission made that in the record before it, and the appellant, in fact, in this case, has filed a complaint with the FCC. They've filed that proper procedure. Just kind of summarize again, we've talked about how this applies to voice and data. I won't rehash that point, but really importantly, kind of to put a bow around this, is that the Federal Telecommunications Act of Section 332 states that a local government, a jurisdiction, can't have the effect of prohibiting personal wireless services. And the Boise team's approval of this permit allows us to do so. It allows us to fill the coverage and capacity gaps in the surrounding areas, and importantly, give the residents and your emergency service providers, your schools, your work from home, the services that they so they so need in these times.
Ms. Regan, your time is
Yeah.
up.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
one question for Ms. Regan, and this pertains to the difference between Title I and Title II that came up earlier. I understand 332C7, and I understand its principle about commingled services and its prohibition against us from prohibiting commingled services. But my question for you is more about how the technology works. There's no such thing as analog cell service anymore. It's all digital. A telephone call, a text, it's all ones and zeros, and it's all data. And so I'm trying to get my head around the distinction between voice and text versus broadband data, when, as I understand it, it's all digital and it's all data. Can you just help me understand how the technology works and how that fits into Title I and Title II? Is she gone?
Oh, no. Whoops.
Madam Mayor, it looks like she's not online anymore.
Oh, no, she must not have heard me ask everybody if there were questions for the applicant because she's no longer online.
Perhaps what we can do is if she returns for rebuttal, before she begins her rebuttal, I can just ask this question then, and then we can move into the rebuttal.
That makes sense. Will you let us know if she comes back on? All right. Okay, so since the applicant is, wait. Oh, it looks like she's back on. Ms. Regan?
I am back on. Yes, sorry, it got disconnected after the presentation.
Hi, Ms. Regan.
I
have a
the agent has a question for you.
I do. I have a quick question, I hope, about how the technology works and how that then fits into the Title I and Title II framework. And I want to preface it by saying that I do understand the 332C7 rule about commingled services, and I do understand that it prohibits us from prohibiting them. And I got that part of your argument. But what I don't understand is how to think about the technology now, because in 2020, all telephone calls are digital, all texts are digital, which means they're all really ones and zeros sent in packets over the airwaves. And from that perspective, I'm trying to understand whether, at the technology level, whether there is any difference between voice and text and broadband services or data.
So it's a great question. It's a pretty complicated question, so I will do my best to answer it. But really, there is still, it's not all text. We have two, as I mentioned, the facility serves two purposes. It serves the existing LTE 4G, which would not all be over the digital that you're talking about. And also it depends on what type of phone the user has too, as well. So unless a user has the 5G phone and that's the only phone that they're using, then that may be all digital in that capacity. But in most instances, most of us still have, the smartphones that are not completely 5G, or a lot of us don't even have 5G capability from our existing smartphones. And so part of the purpose of this facility is to fill in the LTE 4G services and also to provide the 5G services.
Would you say that failure to approve this application would materially inhibit your client's ability to provide 4G services as well?
Yes, I mean, it's a dual site.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton.
Yes.
The appellant brought up something about the propagation study being insufficient. And in your presentation, you talked about how it was, and perhaps you went into details here, and I just perhaps missed it, and you could clarify it again. Who decides whether or not what the regulations are sufficient for a propagation study when you submit it to us?
So let me just make sure I understand your question, Councilmember Halliburton. When you say regulations, what are you referring to? The city, like the council regulations, what they would say a propagation study is, or?
Yeah, so we require you to submit a propagation study, and it was submitted later on, but it was determined that it was sufficient. But the appellant is saying that it's not sufficient. So I'm trying to figure out how can you tell if a propagation study is sufficient or insufficient? Is it regulated federally? Is it regulated by our city? How do we determine whether the propagation study you submitted was enough?
So our propagation studies are, Verizon has a team of thousands of RF, which radio frequency engineers, and they create these propagation maps from their very sophisticated systems and studies and the like. And we submit these types of propagation maps to jurisdictions across the country and are accepted. In this case, the RF engineer for this region did their search ring, which is where do we need coverage and capacity, looking for facility. And then as part of that, they create these propagation maps to say, look, we don't have coverage and capacity in this area, and therefore we need to build this facility. So this is the type of map that we use, federal district court, all the way up and down, and then we provide it to the city. And the city, in its capacity, planning and zoning commissions, often, their specialty expertise to review these maps to determine whether or not they're sufficient. I think in particular in this case, we've got a situation where there really isn't any capacity there, and that's what this map shows. So the facility is going to provide that. The other point I would make is that in many cases where we have appeals or the like, appellant or whoever it may be will hire their own expert to come in and perform its own analysis to determine whether or not and demonstrate if there's coverage or capacity. And that wasn't provided in this case. There are certainly the ability to do so here, and that the city could have asked, in certain instances, we've had it where the city could retain an independent expert if they don't feel like they have that expertise to make the evaluation.
Thank you, Madam
Did
Mayor.
that answer your question?
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up. Was there anything different with the propagation study that you did here versus the ones that you typically do? Or is this the typical propagation study that you're doing at all of your locations?
This is the typical one.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? All right, it looks like we will move on now. If there is a neighborhood association, yeah, because we've had the appellant and the applicant. The neighborhood association of record is the West End, for maybe Jason Durand. All right, we thought it was unlikely that they would speak, but we had them listed just in case. Okay, with that, we will move into public testimony. If there are no further questions for staff before we do that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton.
Sure.
If I could just ask maybe the same question to Cody about the propagation study. How do you determine whether this propagation study is sufficient or insufficient?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, in this case, initially with the administrative review, as I guess admitted or acknowledged, we didn't have a propagation study in issuing that original approval. With this 5G installation, we can actually visit the site, whether it be in person or through virtual, and see that there's no antenna in the area. These 5G antennas cast such a small radius that it's pretty apparent that there is no coverage. That being said, the applicant did supplement the application at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that was clearly depicted graphically with that color illustration. And honestly, we're not experts in radio frequency and things like that, but based on the fact that there are no antennas in that immediate vicinity, it was pretty clear that was enough.
And that's the typical propagation study that you would expect to receive on a project like this?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, yes.
Thank you.
All right, we will move into the public hearing. So I'm going to start with the names on the list and then see who else is here, and then we'll go into those waiting online. First up, we have Hank Allen.
Hello.
Hi.
Madam Mayor, City Council, Hank Allen, 687 West Rush Court. So the propagation study, Can I take this off while I'm talking?
No,
Or do I keep it on?
with the new guidelines
So,
are staying on.
You guys are kind of close. I can see your names, Jimmy and Patrick. And I want to connect the dots for you. That propagation study is a 5G propagation study, right? So I'm a general contractor, kind of a simple guy. And I know that if I go in that area on my old cell phone that uses 4G, I have plenty of coverage. So there's plenty of cell coverage throughout all of Boise with a 4G coverage. So when Patrick asked the question, help me understand digital and what part of this is broadband, what part of it is telecommunications. The Verizon representative, she kind of is trying to split it there, but we do have 4G and there's plenty of service in that area for 4G to make basic text and telecommunications. We can all talk on our cell phones and we know that. Now, when it comes to 5G, which is going to be a broadband digital signal, of course, there's no reception there. It's a new technology, but we don't need it, right? We have right now for broadband, we're all wired, hardwired to our houses for the most part in the whole Treasure Valley. We have, CenturyLink and old Cable One, right? So we have plenty of hardwired, safe broadband coverage. We don't need 5G, okay, which is a wireless broadband coverage. So the Verizon representative is kind of trying to split hairs on what Patrick is bringing up, that we need a different propagation study. It's incorrect, okay? So now let's get a propagation study for 4G basic Title II coverage. And you'll see there's plenty of service here. We don't need any more cell towers, okay? Now, for myself, the reason I'm so passionate about this is electromagnetic radiation makes me sick, right? Being here in the office or in this facility with Wi-Fi on, cell towers around, I will walk home, I'll have heart palpitations, and I'll be lethargic and feel like I have the flu for the next 2 days, okay? So I avoid having Wi-Fi routers on in my house. We don't have a microwave oven. And I moved out into the country so I can avoid being around cell towers so I'm not irradiated 24/7, okay? And by allowing 5G and
It's just a
these cell
warning.
towers to be coming in close to my house and irradiating me and my family 24/7 is not acceptable because we already have hardwired broadband to the house. We do not need this. Make sure to ask her, I want to see a 4G propagation study. We all know we have plenty of coverage. Don't listen to it, okay? I'm out of time. Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Vivian, is Lockney or Lockery?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. Vivian Lockery, 2211 North 19th Street. A Boise resident of 27 years, public health scientist and medical professional. And from that background, I make my testimony. I attest and affirm the following statements are true, accurate, and within my personal knowledge. I spoke to planning and zoning about my.
Great. That way we
better?
can make sure that everybody online hears you.
I spoke to planning and zoning about public safety, and I want to talk to you about public safety because current city approvals for these WTFs or WCFs, wireless communication facilities, the FCC refers to them as WTFs, AKA small cells, constructed in the public rights of way as close to 30 inches per our city development code, do not provide even the most basic public safety. Now, Ms. Reagan spoke to you. She brought up numerous points about this 2018 FCC order. What she didn't tell you was that in 2019, August of 2019, significant portions of that order were vacated by the DC Circuit Court. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about that. It was decided that FCC's characterization of the deregulation of WTFs as consistent with its longstanding policy was not logical and rational. Why? Because the FCC mischaracterized the scale, size, and footprint of the anticipated nationwide deployment of the 800,000 unit network of WTFs. Also decided, such WTFs are crucially different from the consumer signal boosters and Wi-Fi routers to which the FCC compares them. Also decided, it's impossible on this record to credit the claim that WTF deregulation will leave little or no environmental impact. Also decided, the FCC fails to justify its conclusion that WTFs as a class or by nature, their nature are inherently unlikely to trigger potential significant environmental impacts. So what I want you to know about the DC Circuit Court is it is esteemed as superseding and not part of the 11 other district courts. This is just something I learned, so I thought maybe it's not common knowledge. A court subsidiary solely to the US Supreme Court and of equivalent weight, which was interesting for me to find out in the absence of an appeal. And in this case, there is no appeal. 15 states have taken measures to protect their citizens from wireless radiation. Several municipalities have passed ordinances that restrict the build out of WTFs. And time does not allow me to provide examples, but none of these protective measures would be achievable if these municipalities were deluded, as the city of Boise, and I don't mean to be demeaning, in thinking that to take additional action would be to circumvent federal law. This refutes.
Ma'am, I tried to give one or two sentences after the time is
Okay.
up. So your time's up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And then Carla Kyle.
My name is Carla Kyle, 3508 West Kootenai Street. Under this permit, the placement of a small wireless communication facility will go into a residential neighborhood in front of someone's house. A recent permit response from Verizon attorney, Mr. LaChance, this was like 2 weeks ago, to the FCC states, Verizon maintains a proposed facility will fully comply with commission radio frequency emission rules. Although emissions for the proposed facility may be well below the FCC's general population limits at ground level, Mr. LaChance reports that the emissions extending 6 feet out to 2 feet below the antennas will exceed the general population limits for radiation exposure. Mr. LaChance states that because the RFE analysis assumes maximum ERP, affected radiated power, the complainant's concern about exceeding expectations is unfounded. Our response: assumption is but conjecture and holds no substance or fact. Your city attorney should know this. A manufacturer specification of the proposed CommScope antenna with electrical watt and gain rates for each antenna port will confirm substance and facts. Only at that time will compliance with SEC 46 CFR 11307 be verified. Proposed mitigation to include a warning sign placed on the pole and a notice letter sent to the pole owner are inadequate safeguards for protection of human exposure to levels of radio frequency in excess of the limits. Once again, Verizon attorneys have used language that circumvents the actual problem of the potential of affected radiated power and the microwave radiation being emitted. Until the city of Boise understands that no one is looking out for its residents' best interests, this means you, me, and everyone in this room, then these small wireless towers continue to be deployed without knowledge of the affected radiated power or microwave radiation saturating our front yards and streets. You simply do not know what is being put out in terms of microwave radiation by the very fact that this permit and hundreds of other permits approved in Boise have no documentation of antennas and canisters, the fixtures that will be put on the tower. I ask you, where is your due diligence in regards to the safety of residents in our neighborhoods? I'm asking the Boise City Council and Mayor McLean to do your job, educate yourselves, protect me, my family, my neighbors, and yourselves as you update and amend and put in place a better ordinance and city code surrounding 4G, 5G infrastructure. If this is not your job, whose is it? Until you do this, I ask you to uphold this appeal for the small cell tower to be deployed in front of someone's home due to lack of city code. So I had a question for Cody Riddle. Can I ask?
You can put it into the record and he might
So
be able to
I'm
reflect it.
wondering-
You've got just a tiny bit
Yeah, and
of
I'm
time
wondering
left.
how many pages of city code you're referring to. As far as I noticed on your website, there was only 2 pages of city code surrounding the parameters on these 4G, 5G structures. There is not enough code. And again, I'm asking you, please do your own research. Listen to everything we have to bring fact and law to you. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. We're all gonna have to not clap. We just ask people just not to react for or against things. We stay orderly and we can move through this more easily, but thank you. So that's the last, I know that some of you came in after the sign up sheet was brought in. So that's the last person I have on the list. So now we're just gonna take people one by one, but first I wanna see oh, no. That's what, ma'am, please. I was about to say, I'm going to go through the list to see if anybody, and I forgot, sir, yes, because I marked him as not being here. If anybody that signed up in advance that we put online is actually here. So then I'll do that next, and then we'll go through everybody else and then to online. So yes, Mr. Misner for Brandon. Yeah, come on up.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice to see you all, Mayor and Councilman. I'm here for Brandon Thompson. And he has a letter that he's written, and I'm going to read that letter to you.
And do you have his address by chance?
You know, I don't.
That's all right.
He's lives in Boise.
Yeah, that's okay.
He works for Power Engineers.
All right.
That's-
That's fine. If you had it, I was just going to have you read it with his name, but
I'm sorry.
we've got it somewhere.
Unless it's in this text here somewhere.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. Anyway, here's the letter. Dear council members, I attest and affirm that the following statements are true, accurate, and within my personal knowledge. My name is Brandon Thompson. I hold degrees in electrical engineering, physics, mathematics, and have practiced as a professional electrical engineer for over 22 years, thus thereby provide expert testimony on fiber optics and wireless equipment. I have been a resident of Boise for over 12 years, and my family has held property and homes in Idaho for over 70 years. For fast internet, local governments can choose everything from the best engineering to the worst. Because you have not sought out experts, you've been tricked into succumbing to the worst engineering. The worst really shouldn't be called a service, as in many ways it's a disservice. For the fastest, most reliable, secure, and non-hackable, safe, energy-efficient internet, you would choose fiber optics to the premises, FFTP. This directs the signal through glass fiber where the data literally propagate at the speed of light. You cannot get faster than that. For data security, you need fiber rather than releasing data into the atmosphere where the signal can be picked up by just about anyone. No one can tap into the data in a fiber optic cable. Where they to try, the glass would break and the signal would be lost. It's essentially impossible to hack and useless to try. Fiber is impervious to terrorism and absolutely necessary for national, state, and local security. All broadband requires starting the signal with fiber optic cable. This cable requires almost zero electrical energy, so it is super conservative, non-wasteful, and efficient. By contrast, if you take the fiber optic signal and transform it into a wireless, you waste more electricity, which you have to transform into pulse modulated microwave radiation. It's a huge burden with enormous data to carry, but slower speed with an atmosphere whose water and OH molecules, in addition to living tissues in trees and any human and animals' bodies in between, optimally absorb and impede the radiation. That means you've got to up the power, use more electricity to get the signal through. You've also got the burden of the 4G LTE tracking of every wireless device. The system needs to know 24/7 where each device is. And then you've got to have 5G beamforming to focus the radiation on that device with a high concentration of radiation on the user and more so on anyone in between. This is not only inefficient, it makes the signal vulnerable to weather changes and moving objects within the beam, which can break up the signal. I still got like 2 more paragraphs here.
You can know what I'm going to suggest is that you, if he wants to have it all on the record.
Can we just leave it with you? Or-
Yeah, you can leave it with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Should I just leave it?
Yeah, why don't you leave it there? That's
Leave it
good.
there? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So one person signed up in advance, Ann Hike. Is that you, ma'am? Yeah, come on up. And then I'll just kind of start over here and move this way for people to make sure that people want to testify. And because some of you, we don't have your names, we weren't able to confirm that you were parties of record. So if you're here in the room and you hope to testify on this, you had to have testified at the first hearing, and that's what makes you a party of record because this is an appeal. Go ahead.
I attest and affirm the following statements are true, accurate, and within my personal knowledge. My name is Dr. Ann Hike. I'm a medical doctor with almost 40 years of emergency room and family practice experience. I sent a letter 13 days ago. I referenced 3 sites on the internet of medical research. Did you look at any of these articles? Do you know how many research papers there are out there on pulse modulated microwave radiation? There's over 20,000. And it shows harms in all species tested, including pets, farm animals, insects, bees, plants, and humans. It only took 10,000 research papers to eliminate asbestos and lead from our environment. So what type of medical problems are there? There's premature neurodegenerative diseases, including dementia and Alzheimer's, attention deficit, autism, insomnia, anxiety, and depression. Also heart arrhythmias and infertility and cancer and biochemical disturbances. I've been evaluating petitions for the new wireless telecommunication facilities for the city of Boise, and I would like to donate my services to locate the next 7 facilities. I recommend that we put them all in your front yards. And you're thinking, do we really need another facility? Many Boise residents are asking the same question as facilities are being erected in front of their homes. What is the power from the facilities? Guess what? It's a proprietary secret. There could be more effective radiated power coming from the 4G towers on the hills, and yet it could be 30 inches from your home. What if your child gets sick from this radiation? Will Verizon help with the medical bills? No, Verizon's company doesn't stand behind even one facility, but uses phony companies with no assets. When you sue for medical compensation, these phony companies will declare bankruptcy. And then who will pay? The city of Boise will. You are assuming the responsibility of harm here. And how many of these claims until the city of Boise is bankrupt? So as to your city motto, Boise for everyone, it's not for the electromagnetically sensitive like Hank back there, or disabled people who use assistive devices that can be interfered with a 5G. These devices include motorized wheelchairs, pacemakers, or hearing aids, such as is needed by the hearing impaired child living next to this proposed facility. Powered by clean energy, these facilities can fall down, start on fire, need repairs, and are a huge energy drain. Shared prosperity across neighborhoods. Illnesses from 5Gs will cause an exodus of people with health issues. Real estate values will plummet.
30-second warning.
There will be a loss of the tax base in a bankrupted city from the legal actions of health harms. How does this create prosperity? Commitment to transparency and openness in government. Tell us how Boise's income has benefited from Verizon's facility erections. Tell us if any of you have personally benefited from the 5G rollout. Will you protect the people who elected you or the companies that have no personal stake in our lives, our prosperity, and our community?
Madam Mayor, time.
Stand up and protect us like you promised. I've expressed no
your time's
matter
up.
of mere concern, but solely matters
Ma'am.
of substance, fact, and law.
Time's
Thank
up.
you.
Thank you. Okay, did anybody else sign up that's here tonight, sign up in advance, so to sign up for online, because I'll take you first. Okay, nope. Okay, you've testified, you said. Yes. Okay.
And Madam Mayor, Barbara is online.
Oh, but we've got Barbara online.
There's a Barb here.
Yeah, she's here.
I'm
Barb, we're gonna go through folks in the room and then we'll call you back.
All right. Thank you.
Blue jacket, orange trim. Are you yellow hat? Nope. Okay. Nope. So you were planning on talking for Barb. Do you want to speak for yourself? Yeah, I want to go through the room so people can leave if they want to leave. That's what I have to ask. Were you a party of record? Okay. And you, ma'am? Nope, nope. Okay, we've got everybody in the room. And just to clarify, if any of you sent emails, not just generally about 5G, but about this specific application before the September 14th meeting, for the September 14th meeting, then you are a party of record. Okay, we will go online now. So Barb, since you were ready so promptly, we'll go ahead and have you go. And then next up, I've got Paul Gee or G and David DeHaas, if you'll just be ready.
Thank you very much. Barb Parsley, 10900 West Wazee. I've worked as an entomologist who studies insects, in case somebody doesn't know what that is, for many years, previously at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and presently for 5 years at a local orchard. I've done research on insects in many conferences and gone to many conferences and discussed research. I would like to address the frequency issues. You know, people have talked about them affecting people. And I just want you to know that there's some real research out there that it does affect people, but it also affects insects. The frequencies, for instance, we know that honeybees are really necessary for our existence. Well, it adversely affects the bee's behavior, the physiology. It drives colony collapse. It affects their motor activity to the comb. It makes bees aggressive. It decreases their colony strength. It causes difficulty for them to return to their hives. It creates problems in swarming. And there's other problems here, but what I'm just trying to show is that the frequencies really affect these insects, or actually any insect. We're dealing with a decrease in honeybee population already, and adding this frequency will only serve to increase this problem. There's also effects on trees. You know, you're the city of trees. Well, the Colorado, excuse my phone in the background. The Colorado research study has shown adverse effects on aspen and pine trees. They show that the trees that are tall, that are affected by towers because they're tall enough, have lesions on them, and the trees that are smaller do not until they grow up taller. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 states that local and governmental entities may make use of the public right-of-way subject to regulatory objectives, such as those relating to public safety and welfare. The above issues would disrupt our food chain, our plants, our trees, certainly affect our public safety and welfare. So I'm submitting to you that these frequencies have been shown and researched to affect animals and insects and trees. I'll leave the medical stuff to my previous speaker there. And I think that the Boise City Council is or whoever is advising them to do this is being short-sighted in having this radiation on the people. That's just my opinion there. I think it's very dangerous. And I agree with the person that said fiber optics is the way to go. There's no problem with that. There's no reason why not to do fiber optics instead of doing something that's radiating through the air. And that is, any questions on that?
Thank you, Barb, very much. Okay, do we have Paul Gee or G?
That would be Paul G. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'm at 688 North 29th Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. Now listen, I am an expert in measuring and mitigating pulsed data modulated radio frequency electromagnetic microwave radiation, RFEMR, just like Kathy Cook, the appellant. We're the only two experts before you. We were also there for the appeal. The applicant didn't bring any experts. The city staff admitted they don't have any expertise. Hey, the city staff didn't do the basic due diligence of hiring a consultant who had expertise. You have no expertise at all from the other side to judge whether the propagation map is worth anything. You have 3 experts telling you it's worth nothing. The 2 of us and Andrew Campanelli. He is the #1 telecom attorney in the United States. He's seen the courtroom, unlike Ms. Reagan, who is a slick saleswoman who passed the bar. I doubt she's ever seen a courtroom. He's won 5,000 cases against people like Verizon. And I'm going to give you his quote exactly. So look, you're relying in the appeal on your attorney's assessment of the RF report. Your attorney has no RF expertise, full stop. That is fatal to the application. Full stop, that's it. You can't accept it. The propagation with numbers is a typical effort from Verizon, and none of it is called probative evidence. No judge would accept it. There is no data to back up the funny colors or the numbers. It's all mumbo jumbo and made up. Okay? This is what your code says. Quote, a propagation study showing the location of existing phillies within the coverage area and radio frequency modeling, of which there was none because there is no math. Modeling implies math. Providing evidence as to why the WTF is needed at the chosen location. Keyword needed, needed, needed. It is not needed whatsoever because we have absolute evidence. If you looked at the appeal, what did we do? We made phone calls all over the place. Yes, it is all about phone calls when you talk about the word coverage. You see, coverage is the one in your code. It's not capacity, it's coverage. Once again, facilities within the coverage area. Ding, 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 ding. Phone calls. We have the evidence. Fatal to the application. You must support the appeal. Here's what Andrew Campanelli says, quote, the applicant will come in with propagation maps, many of which are bogus, like this one. Without the data behind the maps, the municipality does not know if the propagation map is worth the paper it is printed on. The truth is that no federal court would take a propagation map without verification. In short, these maps are not probative evidence. You could have gotten verification by hiring an expert. Your city staff did not. Your city staff already admitted they are not experts. Your attorney is the one that approved the map. Come on, folks. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding. You have to take care of what's in the record.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just a point of privilege or observation. Mr. Campanelli, the attorney, is obviously not a party of record, and he did make statements, but I think all of us are going to be listening to the person who testified here and not to somebody who testified somewhere else.
You
All right,
fucking kidding me?
Next up, we have David DeHaas.
Hello.
Hi there. We hear
Hello.
you. Yes, we hear you. Welcome.
Welcome. My name is David DeHaas, 1116 South Vista, Boise, Idaho. If the city of Boise is to follow the written ordinance, this tower application must be denied. The application did not provide a legitimate propagation study. There are no specifications, no dry test cited, only a colored map that any first grader could have drawn. This is not a valid propagation study. A real propagation study must be done independently with a cell phone and meters. In order for the tower to be built, there must be a gap in coverage. We know from our own study, there is no gap in coverage. I am shocked your legal department has been very sloppy in processing these applications. Many are not signed. None have a propagation study. We pointed this out earlier. When we did, the applicant brought in a shaded map. The legal team of the city has failed you, the council, and the citizen. The city has a duty and a right to protect the private enjoyment of our property. There is no reason at all to have towers that radiate 25 million times more radiated power than it takes to make a cell phone call. We can get our data from our cable. Cable is faster than 5G and safer. This is bigger than COVID. Why can I say that? Well, at least with COVID, I can boost my immune system and mitigate my risk. This technology or unwanted pollution, I can't dodge it. I can't protect myself or my family. Where is Verizon's proof? They provided none, just colored maps. The falsehoods that Verizon have provided are numerous. I've sent you all data on the law, the real law, even the most recent ruling. You can and must properly regulate this technology. None of these towers should have been allowed to be turned on. as they have not met the ordinance requirements. I have sent you the information of some of the 17,000 studies that show these unwanted pollution radiates all the way through a baby's brain. It decreases melatonin levels and is where the towers are located. Those homeowners will experience a 20% decrease in property value. We should not be here at all tonight. Quite frankly, I'm very disappointed in the city's response to our request for a meeting that we asked for back in June. I have spoken to two of you. I'm thankful for that. But we've not had a dialogue. Back in the day, over my 45 years in business, whenever I've had a problem with either planning and zoning department or something's came up, we sat down, we had a cup of tea, we met. In this case, I felt completely disenfranchised and shut out of the process. While Verizon gets to meet with the citizens and continue to bring data that is not sufficient at all, other cities are keeping this technology out of the neighborhoods and creating setbacks at 2,500 feet from residences. They have put a cap on power. Some cities have completely shut out 5G, including our own Mountain Home and Ammon, Idaho. And they're doing fiber optics to the premises. This is safe and faster speeds. Some cities like Eagle and Harrison, Idaho have asked us to come in. They've allowed us a 1-hour presentation. Harrison has asked us to give a whole day of a meeting to provide them with the information that they need to make the decisions to properly regulate this. Further, who is providing the liability to protect the city for the health of damages? Lawsuits that are sure to come. There is no insurance that provides any city or entity with insurance against health effects from EMF. Why do you think Verizon uses independent contractors to apply for these applications and own these towers? It's called the shell game. Verizon mitigates liability by putting independent contractors in place of them. And this is outlined in their prospectus. There's not one insurance company in the entire world who will give you insurance and get the health effects of EMF. That should be raised the hackles on the back of your neck right now. Look, we're all in this together. We just want to get together and have this properly regulated and keep it out of our neighborhoods and keep us safe. And over the years,
Your time's up.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. So that was the last name I had on here. Are there other folks that are, oh, did you have?
Madam Mayor, before we move
Sure,
on,
go ahead.
I would, similarly to Council President Clegg, I'd like to address the accusation that we met with Verizon representatives about 5G. I have never met with a Verizon representative regarding 5G and have actually met with citizens who were concerned about 5G. So I just wanted to kind of put that to bed.
All right, thank you. I have nobody else signed up in advance. Are there people whose hands are raised on Zoom that I can call on?
Madam Mayor, I do have someone that just raised their hand, but I do need to check if she is a party of record.
Okay, and who is that?
It is Heidi Hasselmayer.
Okay. Heidi Hassel, we're just checking. You might be able to answer. We're just checking to see if you're a party of record, in which case we'll open up the line for you.
Madam Mayor, I do not see her as a party of record.
Okay.
I do have a Jason Evans who is on a party record, and he does have his hand raised.
Okay, I'm Jason Evans. And Jason, before you speak, I just want to explain to Heidi that this is an appeal. And so I'm not sure if you were on when I explained to the folks in the room. In order to testify on this tonight, you had to have testified at the first planning and zoning hearing. And so that's what we mean when we say that you were not a party of record. And our records indicate that you did not testify at that one. If you need to send a note to the clerk, I think you can do that through the chat. And we'll go ahead with the person who is a party of record, whose name I've already forgotten. I'm sorry.
Jason Evans.
Jason Evans.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Jason Evans, and I am here representing Verizon as well tonight as the real estate specialist. Just more of being available to answer any questions that may have come up that Melissa didn't answer, or just any items that needed to be discussed.
Then we'll have you and Melissa will have to work out who does rebuttal at the end of this.
Perfect, thank you.
That's more appropriately had there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Madam Mayor, I don't see anyone else.
Okay, we don't have anybody else, so I'm gonna give the city council an opportunity to ask additional questions of staff. And if you'd like to do that before we move into rebuttals. Or do we do additional questions at the end? Oh yeah, before, yep, as stated before rebuttal. So if there's anything else, Cody's online. All right, and then can you remind me, James, of the order? Okay, so we will now move into There's nobody else. That's right. I went through the room. And we'll now move into rebuttals. And first in the rebuttal order is the applicant. So someone from Verizon, did you all decide who was speaking? And rebuttals are 5 minutes long. Yes, we can unmute Melissa Regan on her phone again. It was a 303 number. Ms. Regan, we're not seeing your phone number, your phone. Typing, so we might be able to hear you. I think
Okay, great. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You've got 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. We heard a lot of testimony from people on record and the applicant, and the public about RF admissions and the cities needing to regulate RF admissions and the like. And I just want to direct the city council's attention first to its own code, in that it does not require any RF admission information from the applicant, but for the propagation maps. And then second, I want to reference the Federal Telecommunications section, or Federal Telecommunications Act, Section 332 C7B, subsection 4. No local government can regulate the placement of personal wireless facilities on the basis of effects of RF admissions to the extent that the facilities themselves comply with the FCC regulations concerning such admissions. And so that is going back to the idea that the federal government has provided the FCC with the authority to regulate this arena, and that it preempts, the federal law preempts state and local regulation here. Verizon wireless facilities have to comply with the FCC regulations on RF admissions. If they don't do so, they don't get the license for the facility, and they cannot maintain their licenses for the facilities. And so while we've heard a lot of information that really is not within the scope of what the city council can consider in deciding making its decision, and as we stated, complaints related to whether or not the facility has the appropriate NEPA review or it complies with the RF regulations are appropriately made to the FCC by petition and complaint, which we've heard that the applicant and others have done so, and they reference the response that has been provided by the Verizon attorney handling that matter. And I just again wanted to circle back to the propagation maps that was discussed extensively through the public comment, and reiterate that these are the types of propagation maps that are provided to jurisdictions across the country. They're prepared by technically trained RF engineers in the company, and they use their mathematical formulas and data to provide those propagation maps. And really, this comes kind of back to Verizon is not in the business of just building facilities to build facilities. Their cost, they have to spend money in order to do so. And so these RF engineers are looking at the coverage and capacity and deciding where they need to place facilities, and that's what this decision is made on. I'm happy to answer any further questions from City Council, but again, we would recommend that the City Council follow the staff's recommendation that the appeal be denied.
Thank you. All right, we will hear from the appellant. Kathy, are you doing the rebuttal as well?
Paul G is going to do the rebuttal.
All right. Paul, are you there? Paul, we can see your forehead, but not the rest of you. Okay, you're almost there. We can't hear you. Oh, there you go. Yep, and you're still muted.
No worries. So I'd like to share my screen if I can. Can I do that? Can you make me presenter?
And the things you'd like to share are related to your rebuttal?
They absolutely are.
Great.
Madam Mayor, he is a presenter.
Oh, you're already presenter, so I think that if you hit share, it might work.
Hold on, I will do that. Share screen. Don't start my time until I get my screen up, okay?
Right.
All right, there is a share right there. All right, so the best I can do for you now is try to teach you some of the things that the Verizon attorney was telling you that is just not true. So I'm trying to give you true facts here because we have done really good work on this, okay? So number one, the way that the FCC is looking at this is a Professor Trevor Marshall made this comment to the FCC June 17th of 2020. I just want to let you know that he's reporting that they're looking at this all wrong, okay? Instead of asking how much power is safe to radiate from one of these cell towers, they should be asking how much power is needed to get the job done. So what you have to understand is when you get this close, you need very little power to get it done. The whole scale of this thing is off. So we have taken actual measurements that are in your public record, and this is how it goes. If you have a macro tower 2,500 feet away, by the time, and 200 feet in the air, the antennas, by the time it gets to houses, it's about 0.002 radiation units, and that equals 5 bars on a cell phone. Life is good. That's minus 85 dBm on their propagation maps. They would say that's good coverage. When you take a small cell, which they did admit tonight was 4G and 5G both, 2 sets of antennas, tonight they tell us that it's not specified in your file. Therefore, no one has the ability to do the effective radiated power calculations. That's another fatal error in the application that was approved. You have to specify exactly the antennas being used and the model numbers so people can do the analysis to figure out whether it's going to work or not, okay? So what happens then is when you put one of those on, we have an example in Sacramento. And I could take you directly to the page if there's time. But essentially what it says is that when you put it in a second-story bedroom, it's 50,000 radiation units. 50,000 is 25 million times higher than that needed for 5 bars on a cell phone. That is what you're doing. You're doing this without understanding a stitch of the technology. You're doing it with no expertise. You're having hired no RF engineer. You are completely flying blind because you do not have the insurance. You have to understand that Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, Aon Best have excluded injury, illness, and death from RF microwave radiation exposures from all of the liability coverage, all of it. You can't even get the insurance yourself. Neither can Verizon. That's because they understand how dangerous this is. They're in a little scam here, and you guys are the patsies. They're handing you the liability. They will clap their hands and walk away. You're not doing business with Big Verizon tonight. You're doing business with some kind of entity that you don't quite understand, and they don't have the assets to pay the claim. That's the bottom line. Hey, we heard about this Telecommunications Act. Let me tell you what goes on right here. Shall not unreasonably discriminate among providers of functionally equivalent services. That's it right there. And shall not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting personal wireless services. That's it right there in the law. Those are both defined as wireless phone calls. There is no such idea of capacity in the law. It's only based on coverage, just as it is in your city code. All of this mumbo jumbo, oh, we need coverage, we need capacity, we need it all, we mush it together. It's all a lie. And all you have to do is read the law and the plain language of the law to understand what we are talking about, okay? So look, at the end of the day, you're listening to an attorney who's trying to sell you on something. What you want to do is really look at the law. Here it is, 47 U.S. Code 324, use of minimum power. This is the law right here. In all circumstances, all radio that is licensed by the FCC shall, hey, that's a must word. You don't have any option here, shall use the minimum of power necessary to carry out the communication desired. We know the communication desired in the law. It is functionally equivalent services, which is defined in the conference report as personal wireless services competing one against the other. That's Verizon's phone calls against T-Mobile's phone calls versus AT&T's phone calls. That's it. That's the truth, okay? If you don't read the laws, you don't know what's going on. Let's talk about the FCC Order 18-133. They talked about that. And they said, oh, the FCC redefined everything. Hey, it doesn't work that way. The FCC can't rewrite law. In fact, that's what a recent federal court judge said. The FCC has no ability to rewrite the law. What they can do is state preferences, and that's all they did there. How do we know? FCC attorney Scott Novick admitted it right there in front of the judges on February 10th of 2020. This is a list of preferences that does not wipe out your case law. The case law that matters here is whether or not there's a significant gap in coverage. We are the only ones that prove there is not. That is the data that you have before you. It has nothing to do with capacity whatsoever, nothing at all. And so at the end of the day, you're going to have to ask yourself.
Your time's up. All right. Are there questions? We did the questions before rebuttals. Just want to make sure that if council has anything else, otherwise I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and the matters properly before you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we deny appeal CAA 20-127. And if I get a second, I'll explain my reasoning.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
a couple of things, kind of as administrative matters. First, nobody has advised us to make a certain decision here. We've received some legal advice from our city attorney. It has nothing to do with what decision we should make tonight, and nobody has instructed us to make any decision. Second, this is an appeal, so we have a standard that we have to apply, and there are arguments that were made under that standard. The first pertains to the propagation study, and the argument, I think, as best characterized, is that we did not comply with our own law by accepting an application that was deficient in a propagation study. First, because the propagation study was not attached with the application, and second, because in view of the appellant, the propagation study was inadequate. But we have an open record procedure, and a propagation study was attached. And given that procedure, it was attached pursuant to our law. So there's not an incorrect application of the law there. The second issue with the propagation study pertains to its adequacy. The argument was a fact-based argument. In the view of the appellants, the fact is that this propagation study is not sufficient. In the view of the respondent in this appeal, they argued the fact is that it is, based on their policy and practice in other jurisdictions and the type of propagation studies that they submit. There are arguments on both sides of that. The Planning and Zoning Commission resolved it one way, and there is a rational basis for its decision. So I don't think we can disturb that fact-based decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The second argument is that there's a NEPA review problem here. But NEPA is a federal standard. The National Environmental Policy Act is not something that we enforce in the first instance. That is for the federal system. There's an administrative and then a judicial procedure for that in the federal system. And I understand that the appellants here are availing themselves of that, and that's good, that's their right, but it's neither our job nor our proper function to be doing that. The third argument pertained to the written analysis, and that goes again to the propagation study issue. There was analysis attached. The argument is that it's inadequate, but that's a fact-based decision that the Planning and Zoning Commission made with a record that is rational for the conclusion it reached. At a higher level, the problem that I see here with all of these arguments is that we are subject to the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And that act provides that no state or local statute or regulation or other local legal requirement, i.e. our approval process, can prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting an entity from providing telecom services. We heard from Verizon today that denial of this application would have the effect of prohibiting by materially inhibiting, that's the language of the statute, provision of both 4G and 5G cellular telecom services. Our hands are tied, and it's not, it really, the analysis doesn't go much beyond that. Congress has said that the city of Boise does not have authority to hinder deployment of telecom services in these ways. The final set of issues and arguments dealt with Title I and Title II and the distinctions between voice type communications and data type communications. And it's challenging, it sounds like, from a technical perspective, but what we know under 332C7 is that when those services are commingled, our hands are also tied. And again, they're tied by federal law. I don't have the power, we don't have the power, no city of the United States has the power to second guess the United States Congress on an issue that it has the ability to regulate, and that's certainly true here. So for those reasons, because we have to follow the law and we have to respect the federal system, I acknowledge that there are challenges that the appellant can bring in federal court or through the federal administrative procedures, but that's the place for them. We can't do it here. So for those reasons, those are the basis of my motion. Final thing I wanted to address is concern that I heard by email from a lot of constituents, including some people who testified here today, that we had met with Verizon. Some of us allegedly had met with Verizon, but not with members of the public, and that this violated due process. And many of these emails demanded in very strong terms that I meet with them. They came in primarily this month and to some extent last month, and their concern was due process. But this appeal was brought to the Planning and Zoning Commission on July 15th, and it was filed to come before us on September 23rd. As of those dates, we are sitting in an appeal type role. It's improper, and due process requires that we not communicate about the substance of an appeal, particularly with the applicant. So due process requires that I not respond to those emails and that my colleague not respond to those emails and engage in those communications too. And so I wanted to air that issue, that it's out of respect for the process and respect for your rights and everyone's rights that we haven't been engaging in those types of ex parte communications with you. It's a matter of fairness. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who has reached out to us. I have had conversations with folks, from like last year about 5G and the various health concerns that everyone has. And when it comes to health concerns, everyone's concerns are real to you. And I completely get that. I think that because this is an appeal, our options are really limited. But I think that what this appeal has also shown us is that we may have some insufficient city code around not only the deployment of 5G networks, but maybe certain types of infrastructure throughout our city. And so I would like to work with our planning and zoning staff to ensure that we are deploying infrastructure throughout our city that is safe and appropriate and gives our citizens the level of service that we want when it comes to technology, but that also ensures safety and is legal from a federal perspective. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. And though this may not, and definitely is not, the result that you are seeking tonight, we'll continue to work on it.
Go ahead.
There.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Bajan talked about almost everything on my list. He certainly covered the legal issues, and I agree with his analysis of what the federal law says versus what our ability to regulate is in light of that federal law, which is pretty limited. We are allowed to regulate for aesthetics. We don't do that. I think, although that is not something anyone brought up today, it's certainly something that we should at least consider. Typically, we are allowed to regulate for public health. However, the federal rulings have tied our hands in that respect. I found it interesting that the main appellant made the case that she was not here to talk about public health, but nearly everyone else who testified around health. I would not argue with the comments that we heard today. It's not really for me to make that judgment, given where we are in the regulatory landscape. It may well be that fiber optics is a better way to provide this kind of service than 5G. That is a case that will have to be made federally if it's to get anywhere, because that's the level at which it's been regulated today. It may well be that in the end, it will be ruled that fiber optics is a better way. Or it may not be, I don't know. That's not for us today to determine. What's for us to determine today is whether or not within the framework that we've been allowed to rule, the administrative decision and the planning and zoning decision on the appeal was ruled correctly. And as I said, I agree with Councilmember Bajent's analysis that it was ruled correctly, and therefore will support this motion. I also agree with Councilmember Woodings that this is an issue that's going to be with us for a while, and there's certainly a few things we can do with our own ordinance to make sure that it's more clear, that it's easier for both sides to understand how to administer and or argue against. And I'll be more than willing to work on that. In the meantime, I think that this is the correct decision given the legal framework that we're working within.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton.
Go ahead.
I don't know that there's anything that I can really add that hasn't already been said. I think if I'm sitting out there and I'm one of the people who testified tonight, it's probably feeling like my concerns are not heard or validated. And I've been there before as well. And so I understand that. I do want it to be on the record, as other council members have done, in saying that I've never met with Verizon, not only for this reason, but for any reason ever. And I certainly haven't met with anybody to talk about 5G in the last few months, but I have talked with people about 5G for the last couple of years and earlier this year as well, before we heard any of this. I want to make sure that that's on record. I also want to make sure that people know that, like, yeah, we're reading your messages, every single one. And it is complicated on how to respond and how we can respond. And I'm sure that it feels like you're not heard right now. That's not the case. And I think that our other council members already spoke to that. Thank you.
All right. If there's nobody else, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right. That is the last item on the agenda. And thank you, everybody, for coming out today. If there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned. See you all. Wait, I don't think we have a council meeting next week for Thanksgiving.
We don't.
So see you in December.
I guess that's the case.
Bye-bye.